Okay, good evening, everyone. This is the Hideout Utah Town Council regular meeting and continued public hearings of March 10th, 2022. Call the meeting to order. This meeting is a virtual meeting. There is no anchor site. For the usual reason, which is while there's a significant improvement in COVID, it's still out there. And our town hall is very small. It makes it a high risk. It's very hard to get 6 feet of separation. Okay, I'm going to poll and get the council members. See who's here. So Bob Nadelberg,
I am here.
Ralph Severini.
I'm here as well.
Good evening, Ralph. Sherry Jacobs.
Here.
Chris Byer.
Here.
Carol Hazelton.
Here.
Okay, we have the full council and a quorum. Thank you. First article of business for this evening is the approval of the December 9th, 2021 Town Council meeting minutes. I have reviewed them and they look good to me, but I did not, to be fair, I did not review them I reviewed them for content and not for sentence structure. So.
I read them, they look fine to me.
Nothing on my end. I had some follow-ups that I saw in there though.
Right, I agree. There's some follow-up, but the minutes are great.
Looked fine to me.
Yeah, it looks all right.
I'm stopping my video because my internet connection is unstable. So we will, Alicia, if you would make a note, please, that we should put on after the minute review a discussion item for follow-ups in the future agendas, since the council wants updates on the various items, and we don't have it on the agenda. Let's do that going forward.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay. If the meeting minutes look good, then I would appreciate a motion to approve the minutes of December 9th, Town Council meeting, December 9th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Who made the motion? Is that Carol or Chris? Or Sherry?
It was Chris,
Chris, thank you. Sorry, it's
I think.
hard to identify all the voices all the time.
I know we all sound alike.
So, all right, so the second was Bob, thank you. Ralph, how do you vote?
Yes,
Carol,
Yes,
thank you. Sherry,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Chris. Chris,
Yes.
thank you. Okay, motion carries. The minutes of December 9th are approved. Let's not on the agenda, but let's capture the concern, the follow-up items, and I'll tell you where we are. Ralph, I know you had some.
sorry, I was on mute there. Yeah, I do. So on page 7, line 16, we were supposed to put up the mission statement of the Economic Development Committee and on our website. I don't know if we made any progress on that, so that would be useful. And then
Janon, you can address that. I don't know where they are on that mission statement. Jan, are you aware if that's been completed and approved by the Economic Development Committee?
Hey, does the council get a chance to review the mission statement
Yeah, for sure. We
before
would,
we post it?
absolutely, Chris. I agree with you.
We
I
still
have
have
not, have not seen it yet.
it's still in formation, and one of our committee members has prepared something, but we've been dealing with other issues regarding PID policy and have not collaborated and finalized, so it's still forthcoming.
Okay, we'll come back to that then. Thank you. Thank you, Jan.
Yeah, did we not distribute that, or did we not see that, but probably needs another distribution, and then,
We
And
haven't
then
seen it yet,
posting.
Ralph. It's not done yet.
yeah, Jan, the one that Craig put together, that's the one I'm talking about.
Right, and we should be meeting on that next Monday, so as soon as we have agreement amongst the committee members, then we can move forward on it.
Okay, thought we had agreement and that everyone said that they were good with that statement, so, okay, we can revisit that. And then on page 8 on line 3, there was I think it was the follow-up on what we're talking about tonight, which would be, sorry, I think it was page 8, line 19.
All right,
That we would do, we follow up on the survey for the WUI.
you're
So,
going to hear that tonight, Ralph.
sorry.
You're going to hear that tonight. You will see.
Oh,
the
so
survey.
have they done the survey or?
Yes, you will hear about it tonight.
Fantastic. Okay, those were the only two things I had.
Carol, you said you had,
Yes, there was something, and I didn't write down the page, I apologize. It was about the design and the height of the pickleball courts that were going in, that was going to be under consideration as to, I think at one point it was suggested 20 feet. And we had a resident who said it should only be 10 feet. And it was going to be decided what that was going to be.
yeah, Thomas was going to work on that, but I don't think they're at a point where they've had those discussions yet.
Okay.
I mean, it's just. Thomas, I don't think they've come forward with any kind of design on that.
They haven't, Mayor. Hi, Carol. We're still working with them on it. We're coordinating. I actually had the opportunity to snap a bunch of photos of pickleball courts over the past month being out in the RV a little bit. And so I'll coordinate with them. They have not yet reached back out to me, but we will be doing that.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. If there are no other questions from council on the follow-up items there, then it's time for public input. So this is where members of the public participating in the meeting have an opportunity to speak on any items that are not on the agenda tonight. If they have a comment or question that they want the council to know about. And the way you get our attention is by selecting the raise your hand functionality on the Zoom control panel. Yes. Brett?
Yes, thank you. I didn't see it on the agenda tonight. It was touched very briefly, I think just a moment ago. I remember back in the discussions of the pickleball court, and I wanted to just kind of emphasize, I think it's in Thomas's purview, but I think it was adopted that the pickleball court would be constructed within the guidelines of a national organization that I had made reference to correct the national organization. And I just wanted to comment that those regulations or those guidelines on pickleball court construction include the surface area, not just fences and heights and things like that, but it actually includes the subsurface and the surface itself. And I really want to encourage that to be looked at closely when the construction of that pickleball court occurs, because that helps ensure long-lasting structure that's not going to settle and so forth. So it's well beyond just fence heights and dimensions. It's actually the construction surface and the surface texture itself as well. So anyway, I just wanted to add that tonight. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Yeah, particularly we don't want it cracking and all that kind of stuff within the first season of first time through the winter, and then we have to redo it again. So, Chris, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. As a member of the public. Right now. I learned today that the annual Jordanelle Community Cleanup Day has been scheduled for May 14th from 10 to 12 in the morning. Last year, Hideout participated in that by having a dumpster, paying for a dumpster that was placed in a few of the parking spaces right in front of the town hall. And that's coming around again. I would love to see the town participate like we did last year. Because we were able to get some of the construction debris and other things that fly around in the wind here and settle. We were able to get those things picked up in lots of different places. I think with this advance notice, we might be able to get more participation this year.
I'm all for it, Chris, personally. Have they contacted us at all? Last year they reached out. So
Yeah, I heard from Nikki Key today, so I just learned today that the date's been selected. So I'd like to forward that on to you and
yeah, we
the town
can
staff.
certainly get Carol to do something with the newsletter about that and so forth. And I mean, we're certainly more than able to sponsor them.
And Chris, will you do me a favor? Will you send that to me also? So that way I
Sure.
can make sure I get the dumpster ready to go and ordered, and I'll work with Dan on that.
So the dumpster, last year, we didn't have to order it.
Oh, perfect.
Nikki handled everything. We just simply had to pay the invoice. So they even dropped it off exactly where we wanted it to be. And Kent was involved in that last year in,
Yep.
scouting out the right place for it.
Okay, well, we'll figure out. And if if it's the same scenarios follow, we'll make sure we work with Nikki or whoever and get it done. So thank you.
That is fantastic. Thanks, Tim.
Okay.
Could I please make a comment about the dumpster? Because I participated in the cleanup last year. And when I went to dispose of all the things I picked up, I could not reach the top of the dumpster. And I was there by myself and I had a devil of a time trying to get it in. I had to try to swing it up and throw it over and it kept bouncing back onto the ground. So
Oh, wow.
maybe could it be a little bit shorter of a dumpster? So
I
that
don't think we can. I think they're pretty standard, Carol, but we could put a platform out there for you.
That would be great. That would solve it.
I don't
Thank you.
think I can get a specific dumpster that's designed for people of our stature, but
Okay, that would be great. Make it a lot easier to get rid of the stuff. Thank you.
Oh, so, okay, so Mayor, you're saying the town will
I could probably
get a platform together?
yeah, I'll get Tim. Can you get a couple pallets? We'll get a couple pallets out there to get us up off the ground.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll have some stuff that We'll make it easy for people of my height to be able to reach the dumpster and close it.
Or my relative lack of strength.
Yeah. Some of those lids are pretty heavy, even though they're plastic. I'd agree.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. You should have had a video camera there. It would have been really
Well,
funny.
Carol, we do. We just didn't know to look at it.
We do.
Hey, Chris.
The
Yeah.
whole area of the town
Would-
hall is under camera, so.
Okay, oh dear.
Would you mind sending the information to me as well so that I can get it up on the website?
Very happy to do that. I think Nikki typically puts together a flyer, so I haven't seen the flyer yet, but I just heard the date. Save the date. It's May 14th, so it's 2 months from now.
Perfect, thanks.
Okay. And then there's another item, Mayor, that I wanted to mention. I believe it was last November. I attended Wasatch County School District meeting about Future Schools Project. And it was really a great presentation. I was able to ask the superintendent about, their plans for potential school in the Jordanelle area. And, got a good response that they already have a site. Out of that meeting, I was contacted by Kim Dickerson, who represents the Jordanelle area on the school board, and also superintendent's assistants. And they would like to come make a presentation and speak to the council on at our next regular meeting. So that would be April 14th. I believe Stacy Moore, who's the assistant to the superintendent, perhaps may have already reached out to Jan, but I.
Yeah,
wanted
they've
to
reached
mention
out to Alicia. I got a note on that too.
that. Okay.
I don't see any reason why we wouldn't let them come chat with us.
No, I think it would be amazing because we get to ask them, direct questions that relate specific to our concerns and needs for public schools for Hideout. So, all right, I just want to also raise awareness about that.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I have it flagged to respond to, I just haven't got to it yet. I don't see any other hand. So I'm going to close public input and move on to the next agenda item. So at a meeting we had a week ago with the Boulders at Hideout development team, we challenged them, the development team, to and our staff to do some work to be prepared to bring some additional content to us for this week. They have not been able to do all the things they wanted to do between last Thursday and now. And so they have asked that we would continue that discussion to a future date. And the proposed date is the 24th, I believe, of March, which is 2 weeks from today, if we can get a quorum. And Alicia has been polling to determine who's available.
So Mayor, may I step in for a second on that? I'm the one who said that I have a conflict that night. And I think we should, because this is such an important discussion, I think we should be trying to get a date when the entire council can show. Because, if we're going to be asked to possibly take action, I think it's.
That's fine. I agree with you, Chris. It is something that we're going to need everybody's input on. So Alicia, I would say we need to go back to, and Jan, we need to go back to those guys and say, doesn't look like the 24th is doable. Chris is unavailable and Bob is unavailable. We'll have to find a different date.
Also, just remember that if we don't know the date tonight to continue it to, we'll have to redo the public notice, which isn't that big of a deal, but you need 10 days to do that.
Yep. Because we don't have a date.
And what's the reason why we couldn't continue it to the next regular meeting?
We can.
Because we all know about that, right? We have an ordinance that establishes our monthly meeting.
Todd and McKay are on the phone right now. I don't know if they want to discuss that and try and get a date certain.
We'll circle back with Alicia and see if we can get something scheduled. Carol, Chris, as you know, we just have our own deadlines that we have to meet, which are independent of this approval process. And so just trying to make sure that we make everything work, but we will work with Alicia to find a date.
So I think one of the things that the council would like to see, and I think I'm speaking for the whole council, is we'd like to see the materials in advance with enough time to be able to consume them and contemplate them and react to them and create and be able to ask questions. So getting them the night before is completely unacceptable.
Well, I'll tell you that that's the reason why we asked that the meeting be continued for the 10th, because we're working like mad to get all of those materials put together in a way that is, that you guys can be prepared for. And just FYI, that's not always, that burden is not always, doesn't rest solely or squarely with us all the time, Chris, but we will make sure that you have everything that you need in time and preparation for the next meeting.
And prior to it, please, I had already sent a notice to Alicia asking her that she contact you to make sure we had it at least a minimum of 3 days in advance.
We can absolutely do that, Carol. That's what we're working to do.
Okay.
So I guess the thing we need to do is we'll have to notice it. So that means it can't happen for at least 10 days. Well, it wasn't planned to happen until 14 anyway, so that's okay. But please send your availability to Alicia, all council members, so that we can try and find a date. So if you would all make a note to yourself at the end of this session to send your calendar availability for the next 4 weeks between now and the next council meeting. We'll see what we can make happen. So Polly, what do we do? We just,
I think we're gonna have to continue it to a date uncertain, and it will have, and then Alicia will have to renotice it once we're able to find a date. And the date can't be within the next 10 days.
all right. Okay, so when you send a calendar, don't send anything, your calendars don't send anything for the next 10 days because we can't do it anyway. So anytime after the 21st of March, we want your calendar. And we will continue this to a date uncertain. Okay. That covers both items 1 and 2 in the public hearing session. So we'll defer those until we have a date and we'll get that noticed. Next item is a discussion and possible adoption of a resolution regarding the updated Mountain Land Association of Governments pre-disaster mitigation plan for Summit, Utah, and Wasatch counties. We have a guest speaker tonight to talk about that from Mag, I think. Is that correct?
Yes, Sarah. May I?
There you are, Shauna, yes.
Yeah, I know that the title's a bit of a mouthful. If you aren't familiar with the plan,
Do you want to share, or do you want me to just scroll for you?
Yes, I would like to share my screen. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. So I've stopped and you can do the share thing. You should have the functionality to do that.
Excellent. Here we go.
There you go.
All right.
It's
So-
coming. There you go.
Okay.
up?
And tell me if I start breaking up or if you don't see the proper thing on the screen or what have you. I'll try to be brief. I know you have a lot on your plate. So the purposes of the pre-disaster mitigation plan are kind of twofold. One is that mitigation planning saves lives, saves money, saves property. And FEMA hopes that every community is thinking about mitigation. It's easier sometimes to focus on response because once the fire starts, you know that there is a fire to respond to. But on the mitigation side, doing things like preserving open space in wildfire prone areas, or I see you have some developments coming up. So requiring building materials that are less likely to catch fire, things like that on the mitigation side, save a lot of money if a disaster occurs. So yeah, the first goal of the plan is just to get thinking about mitigation. And the second purpose of the plan is to make any participating entity, so Hideout, eligible to apply for FEMA grants. And also, if a disaster occurs, it greases the wheels for getting FEMA funding.
So Shauna, before you get too much detail, I don't know if everybody on the call knows a little bit about MAG, what they do, and so it might be useful to just take 3 minutes and kind of remind everybody how MAG has certain key areas that they try and manage for the member constituencies.
Right. Yes. Perfect. Okay. MAG, Mountain Land Association of Governments. Our mission is to help communities achieve their visions in Summit, Utah, and Wasatch counties. So we ultimately answer to all the mayors and county commissioners in Summit, Utah, and Wasatch counties. So we do lots of transportation planning across borders, sort of regional projects in Utah County. In Wasatch, we've done things like their Wasatch County Transit Study. Perhaps you're familiar.
Yeah, MAG worked with us on the SR 248 corridor agreement with UDOT, for example.
Yes, exactly. So if you have something that's regional that crosses boundaries, MAG might be involved with that. Does that be familiar?
Yeah, I am. I just want to make sure that the council refresh for the council and the attendees background. So MAG is as Sean said, it's called the Mountain Land Association of Governments, and we all pay a fee into that, and the Wasatch Summit and as you said, Utah counties, and we get to leverage the areas that these guys help focus on. And one is what we're seeing tonight. One is transportation planning. There's some they do some work for aging services, some other things as well. So
yeah, exactly. Thank you so much. So a couple of years ago, we saw that it was starting to get time to think about updating the pre-disaster mitigation plan so that we're all square with FEMA. And MAG came to our executive council of all those leaders, mayors and commissioners, and said, hey, would you like us to update this again? We know it can be a strain on local resources for each town and city to create their own plan. And so the executive council said, yes, please go ahead and take this off our plate, so to speak. And so since then, I've been working with every community in our jurisdiction, including Hideout, to update this plan. And Jan has been just wonderful to work with. I can see a lot of good things happening in Hideout. So we do have that wonderful PDF that you brought up. we hoped this time around to create a website that would be a little simpler and more accessible, so that if you don't have time to scroll through 300 pages, you can just come to this website and, you know, click and find what you want relatively quickly. So with that, I think the two things most interesting might be the risk assessment and map section, and then the strategies that we've worked with Hideout to develop. So let's take a look at the maps real quick. If you go to that risk assessment, you can scroll in and out of fire, flood, and earthquake hazard maps. Fire is obviously of most concern to Hideout. So the farther you scroll in, the more critical facilities you'll see. And yes, I hope that that's something that will be of use to you. Legend off to the side here. I will note that this fire map, the data will be updated, is being updated like this year. So soon this will be out of date. And it also, the way that this lights up reflects the not just the likelihood of something catching fire, but also what assets there are in the area. But I hope that's helpful in general. We also worked to come up with mitigation strategies, and this is where the really good stuff comes out in the plan. So after looking at the maps and coming up with like what the greatest vulnerabilities are, we worked with Jan and others to develop some strategies for mitigating those disasters. These can all be they can be very aspirational. No community is held to these strategies. There's no penalty for not achieving them. But if you have a strategy in the plan and you want to go out for a FEMA grant, it's more likely to move ahead in that grant process if it's specifically mentioned in the plan. So the more strategies, the merrier. Right, so we have maps, we have our strategies, and since this is coming before you to be adopted tonight, I think you already have an adoption resolution ready to go. If you're happy with the plan and sign that resolution, just share it with me or Eric Martineau. I'll forward on his information so that you can be officially recorded as participating and having approved the Mountainland Pre-Disaster Mitigation Plan, so that you are eligible to apply for those grants and to have an easier time receiving funds if a disaster occurs. Are there any questions?
I actually reviewed all the pages. I didn't, to be fair, I didn't study the other counties. But I did look at your entire body of work. It's nice piece of work, well done, very comprehensive. I like the risk analysis matrix for high likelihood and high impact. Very useful way of thinking about things. And I think you guys nailed it for us. I mean, our biggest issue by far is fire, I think. There's also some hazards associated with erosion and stuff like that, but the fire one is the one and you may have noticed on the agenda tonight, we are talking about adopting wildland urban interface, which is a step towards hazard mitigation, right?
Yes, definitely. It's great to see that on the agenda. Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to thank Shauna for attending tonight. And just to clarify, we adopted the plan a couple of years ago, but because FEMA has updated the plan, so that's the reason we need to re-adopt.
I have a question. I really loved reading the information. I thought it was fascinating. I wondered if you had it available in a booklet form or a book form, because it was 379 pages. And I mean, it's really hard for me to do 379 pages on my computer. Do you have a booklet?
We do not. We do have, so the mountainland.org/hazards, you can get to a simplified version on the website. We'd be happy to print a book out for you, but we don't have them ready to go.
Okay, I'd actually love to have a printed copy. If you could somehow get it to Jan and then Jan can get it to me, that would be great.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm with you. Printed physical things feel a lot easier to comprehend. A lot
Right,
of the-
it was fascinating, I thought. Yeah, thank you.
Hey, I'll jump in here, Shauna. This is Ralph speaking. Really, by the way, I've downloaded a few things in the past from the org. You really do a great job. So thanks for that. Hey, I do have a question on your page 367, which is part of your, or 368, sorry, on your capabilities assessment. It's kind of a big, long table of the various towns. It says a no for our maps and plans, and then in the last column, ways to improve, it says here needs to be part of Summit County's emergency alert system. So along those various columns, codes and ordinances, admin and technical, education and outreach, we have a total blank on one of them. Where do you see us, and where do you see us in that regard in relationship to these items? And then two, why should we be part of Summit? Can you just maybe explain a little bit more about
Ralph,
that?
what
If you
page are you
can.
seeing now?
Talking about their page 368, which is under, it's a master table of capabilities of assessment for every town. And it starts out with maps and plans, codes and ordinances.
Right.
Their page 368, appendix, must be appendix 11 or part 11.
Yeah, I got it. I just,
Yeah, so Hideout's kind of down at the bottom of the page, and it says no maps and plans, and then we're blank on education and outreach. And then importantly, I was interested why we should be part of Summit County's emergency alert system. So if you could share that, if you don't have that information, particularly for Hideout, maybe we can grab that between now and the next meeting.
Right. So this was pretty average for towns in the area. Maps and plans is like, do you have a separate emergency preparedness plan? Cities that have emergency managers, this is easier for them to say, yes, we have that down. Some cities post maps on their websites or refer people to MAGs, to Mountain Lands Hazard Maps, just so that the public is kind of aware of that and has easy access to that information. So it might be something that you'd like to put on your website. As far as the emergency alert system goes, I heard feedback that because you're so kind of geographically, you're closer to a lot of Summit than to Wasatch County. So when disasters occur in Summit County, it's more likely to affect you than the information you receive from Wasatch. But I know there's been some back and forth about how do you best get on that county emergency alert system and what's the best county to be part of. So I could change that. You don't need to be part of Summit County's emergency alert system.
I think we would be happy to be part of Summit County's. I'm not sure they'd be happy to have us. Maybe you can help us with that.
That's a good point.
We do have some maps. We have all of our underground lines mapped in a GIS type environment. We have consciously not posted those, made those fully publicly available because of security, for security purposes. But we do have, we do know where the gas lines are and the water lines are and so forth.
Yeah, and if it's secure, please, this is not a recommendation to put secure things on the website. And also Hideout, other cities have more floodplain, and they're very particular about, like, let's let everyone know where the floodplain is so no one decides to pave over great parts of it or try to build there. Whereas Summit County, it's more fire, and you know that you're kind of surrounded by fire. So
we're well above the dam from a flood risk standpoint. But the rest of Wasatch has concerns, I'm sure.
So
And what's the recommendation for education and outreach? Maybe I didn't get to delve into every little topic, but that sounds like it's, we're totally blank. So I know we've been trying to do some things, including doing better planning from the emergency preparedness standpoint. And that may have not been factored in here when, this was inked. By the way, how often do you update this?
every 4 to 5 years.
Oh, okay. So is this data that we're looking at now, is this actually a several years old, or?
No, this is information that I got while talking with Jan over the summer. So I would have talked to a few different departments or council members or whatnot when getting these answers. But as it was, this particular table is more of a check the box for FEMA, hence it's in the appendix. And I could have done more to like search out the nuances.
So does it affect the fact that, because we have adopted an emergency operations plan for Wasatch County, for example, by resolution. We're working on wildland urban interface. Is it important to have those in here when we go for FEMA funds? Should that ever happen, or is this okay?
I think that this is okay as is. This is okay as is, but I'd be happy to include those things and change the table. So you've adopted Wasatch County's emergency operations plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, Jeremy Hales owes me some feedback. So.
Okay, wonderful. I'll update that, as well as it sounds like you have a brush collection day. Is that what
Well, we have a cleanup day, and we have a fairly aggressive weed plan as well. It helps.
Mhm.
So we're trying to do some stuff, and we participate with the fire department, with the fire district, with Troy, and providing on data on what we've done for fire mitigation each year.
Okay.
So we do some work in this space, and as I mentioned, we have mapping as well.
So would that also help us to be in compliance with the ways to improve, so to speak?
Let's see. I think that you have several of these things in your strategies, whether it be, let me flip over to my strategies page. Things like educating homeowners on fire-wise practices, updating the code, which it sounds like you're doing right now. Looking at HOA landscaping requirements to reduce water use. Things
we had
like
a meeting
that.
with the HOAs on a week ago Monday, so talk about wildland urban interface.
Mm-hmm. So I do see some of these things in your strategies already, certainly as it pertains to fire. Sorry, did that answer the question, Carol?
Yeah, I was just thinking that, if we're going to update this, we update it across the row here. And I don't think we're ever going to be part of Summit County's.
It's done every 4 or 5 years, Ralph, so it's going to be out of date. Everybody on the list is going to be out of date over the next 5 years, but we should try and start with I just want to make sure that if we're missing pieces that affect our ability to get FEMA support, then we should make sure that those get in there.
So on that note, if you're done, Ralph, are you done, Ralph?
Yeah, I just figured we'd go through this and you're right. I wasn't sure if there was any interdependencies, or dependencies on something else like a FEMA or town insurance, or, if we don't do certain things, does it impact other stuff? So thanks, Sean. I appreciate this.
If it's my turn.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I echo the sentiments of my other council members here. I do know that we're focused on wildland urban interface and fire, but there are some other potential hazards that are recognized in the report, but aren't applied to Hideout, and I'm just wondering why. So for example, severe weather, it is possible we could have like a huge snowstorm or some crazy cold snap. Exceptional drought, hopefully we're going to get out of that one day, but that's the other flip side of the coin is exceptional drought, but we're already watching the water get less and less at the Jordanelle. And then other things like rockfall, I don't know, on a small scale anyway, we're already having rocks calving off in certain areas, including the entrance to get to the town hall. And can you or someone explain to me, why aren't these things recognized? Are they not worthy of, being at the same risk level as fire, and so therefore they were not mentioned for Hideout? Or is it that the Hideout didn't get a thorough kind of a thorough accounting of all of the potential hazards here?
Right, okay. Some things like fire and flood and landslides, they're easier to see because we have maps that show where the potential is. For rockfall, where we may not have the specific date or location of something that's occurred. Also winter weather, it's so broad and endemic that unless there's a strategy that an additional strategy to address it, like creating another road so you have more routes, routes that won't be blocked by snow. Those are things we kind of assume that you already have your snow crews out and you're salting the roads and have emergency generators to address things like winter weather. If you do feel like something else needs to be mentioned in the plan, I would be more than happy to include more strategies and kick it back to FEMA with those revisions. Again, you can put as many strategies as you want in. They can be very aspirational. So if we did miss something, which there's always going to be something, but I'd be more than happy to include any ideas that you have for additional ways to mitigate winter weather or rockfall or whatever else you think could be a problem.
Thanks. That was a good answer. I did notice, and by the way, I couldn't read all of this. This was a huge document and there wasn't enough time. I admire that Carol was able to get through everything. I think air quality was mentioned in there and that it's not a city concern.
Depends on the city.
Right. Depends on the city and I guess the topography. But, it feels like something like, and this may be out of scope from what you're talking about, but I'm just going to mention it because this is a council meeting. So air quality, this is something that's kind of bugged me for a while, is, isn't it at the city level where in order to mitigate the effects of air quality issues, we might do some of the strategies that you put in here, which could be, our building code that might require, in new construction, we might require a plug for electric cars or, may not allow wood burning fireplaces or, wood burning, open wood burning, things like that, even though it's, obviously regional concern because air is everywhere, but it feels like the enactment of restrictions ends up falling in a lot of cases to cities. So is that and it may not be appropriate for this particular disaster plan, but it's really more of a observation and a question about, if it doesn't belong in here, where does it belong?
I think those strategies would be perfectly appropriate to include in the plan. Other cities, I think Heber City has done that, have that as one of their strategies to have anti-idling ordinances, and Park City is big on reducing auto dependency, reducing our tailpipe emissions. So yes, it's a perfectly valid strategy. Yeah, I'd be happy to put it in.
Okay, great. Thanks. Super.
So it sounds like there are a few things that you'd like to add to Hideout strategies, and as well as update that table of the current capabilities. In which case, would adopting this plan that would be pushed back to the April meeting, it sounds like?
I mean, I would like to see a little more robustness in, because I didn't have time to read it all, I just did a search on the word hideout, right? And everywhere hideout was mentioned, that's what I read about. But those are my thoughts. I don't know what the rest of the council feels like, but air quality is kind of a big deal in my mind. And obviously we can't do everything, from the city perspective, but we can at least do the right things and hope that the communities around us do similar right things.
Well, I would say that adopting this plan as it stands does not preclude our doing other things. As Shauna mentioned, it gets looked at every 4 or 5 years. And so, this is an update because FEMA's rule change. I personally would like to see us move forward. We can still add other things, have a running update on this plan as over the next 5 years, so that there's even more robustness to it the next time we do it. But the longer we wait, the more at risk we are should something happen and we haven't adopted it. Then it becomes more difficult to reach out to FEMA and other organizations for support. So I'd rather suggest that 90% of something's better than 100% of nothing. And if we don't adopt it, we got 100% of nothing. So I'd like to see us consider moving ahead, and then we can keep tweaking it over the course of time. She's not going to update it every year, but doesn't mean we can't add programs to our activity list as we have the means and the time to do. And then the next time they update it, it'll just reflect all those things that we've done.
So if we don't make any changes to the hideout specifics in here, does that mean that, if we need any kind of federal assistance because of wildfire, that we'll get that because we're including wildfire? But if we needed federal assistance or something else, let's say there was a landslide or, something that happened and we needed some kind of assistance, or seismic activity, that even though we're not on the fault line, doesn't mean the houses here don't shake and there couldn't be some kind of a problem. Does that mean we're not eligible for funding?
No, it doesn't. By not adopting this, it means we're not eligible. But this is designed to service Wasatch, Summit, and Utah County, and be a tool for every one of the locations in there. And my understanding, Shauna can correct me if I'm wrong, that adopting this means that we've done the right things to be eligible to submit for aid.
Correct. When if a disaster occurs, FEMA wants to see that you were at least thinking about mitigation and you had looked at your risks. So even if you were thinking about wildfire and then a tornado occurred, just the fact that you were prepping for something, that's what FEMA wants to see before they, give out a bunch of money.
So Chris, it doesn't have to be specific to the exact disaster that's going on. That the hideout plan doesn't have to list every possible iteration of disaster in order to be eligible for funds.
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you. No, I was just struck by just some couple of inaccuracies there. That's why I was questioning whether or not, there's enough hideout detail in here. If there was a review, I like, there's a name in here, Lynette Schinderling. I don't know who that is. Is that
I didn't
somebody?
either.
So why is something like that in the plan? And that leads me to question, is there enough accurate hideout detail in here? It just made me wonder about the actual state of this plan, and, are we adopting a plan that was not thought out enough from the town perspective?
So the current plan expires on May 18th. I am sending in a couple of little revisions to FEMA. For example, those floodplain administrators, that's probably where you saw the incorrect name. That just came off a state website, and not all the names, some of the names were a couple years out of date. So if you'd like to send me changes that you want to see, or any inaccuracies that I can correct, I can get those fixed and have FEMA give me the thumbs up again. As long as you adopt the plan before May 18th, you will have continuous coverage.
Okay, so if we adopted it tonight, we could still get you changes. You'll be able to make corrections between now and what point?
May 18th.
May 18th. Okay. All right, that sounds good.
Great, thanks. Good questions.
Hey, Shauna, has everyone, what's the adoption rate in the list of towns that are in like the capabilities assessment?
So FEMA only gave me the thumbs up for the plan like early last week. So throughout April, cities will be adopting it. Throughout April.
Understand.
So it's low at this point.
All right, does that make us an early adopter? If we go tonight.
Is there Alicia, is there language in the package for a resolution for adoption, or?
I thought there was a resolution in there, or a draft resolution.
I saw it too, but maybe it's before all the appendices. Maybe that's where it is. I don't know if Polly's reviewed the draft. There it is.
It's on page 298 of the packet.
It's on page 2. Yes, that's what I'm thinking I'm showing on the screen, Chris, unless you're not seeing my screen. Are you guys seeing my screen, or am I sharing something else?
No, I didn't. I thought you were scrolling for it, and I decided to do a find, and it went right to page 298. So,
I'm not seeing your screen, though.
That's what I was trying to figure out.
Yeah, maybe, are we still seeing Sean?
I thought I went back and started sharing, but apparently I'm not.
Yeah, I see someone's name up here, so my screen.
I could see your screen.
I thought
There you go.
I can see it.
Yes, I could see it too. I could see it from the beginning.
might have been operator error on Ralph's part.
I didn't do anything. So.
Polly, have you had a chance to look at this? Do you have any issues with this language?
Mayor, this is
I haven't.
I looked at it with Jan earlier, but I don't know that we have a final resolution. But we looked at the language in the proposed one, yes.
So Cameron, does that mean that we can't adopt this because we don't have the resolution language in our correct format?
You could adopt it and just put in hideout town of hideout, in those blanks.
Cameron, you said you did a review of the language. Did you, were there any concerns of yours about the language of this, this model resolution?
No, it's essentially just adopting it by a resolution for the town. So it's not a binding document on the town. It's just a matter of official notice that the town has recognized this document and adopted it. So the language in the proposed one is fine, and it would be just like amending another draft that was published. You could pass the resolution with the amendment of identifying the town of Hideout.
Okay, thank you. So I need a motion and a second from council to adopt the, I gotta get the language right. With the updated Mountain Association of Governments pre-disaster mitigation plan for Summit, Utah, and Wasatch County, with the proposed language after inserting the town of Hideout into the appropriate categories.
I'll move.
Second.
Thank you, Carol. Who was the first second?
I think that was me.
Thank you, Bob. Okay. Chris,
Yes.
Sherry,
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
thank you. Bob,
Yes.
Carol.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Shauna, and thank you, council. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here, Shauna. Really appreciate your participation tonight. Okay. So the next one is to talk about the Wildland Urban Interface Code. In here is really a 2-page or 3-page document with a lot of detail behind it, but the Tim and the Wasatch Fire District, I think Clint's on tonight, put together for sharing. Those that we have this up on the website. We have sent it out to residents. We've got some comments back, which Alicia has shared, I think, with council. People want to know how it affects them, what do they do if they're in progress, et cetera, which we'll address in a minute. Tim held a meeting with the HOAs, including Rustler, Shoreline 1 and 2, and Community Preservation Association. And also the Deer Springs, I think. Deer Water. So Tim, can you briefly update everybody about that?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and good evening, council. So we did meet on Monday with me and Clint, sorry, not Clint, Troy, with Wasatch Fire. We did meet with representatives from the HOAs, and we talked about this and kind of just addressed, some of the easier things to maybe understand and for our HOAs moving forward. And I know we've talked about this in general in the last couple of meetings, but Mayor, if you can scroll down maybe just to the second page, and Troy and I will tag team each other here a little bit with comments and for discussion. But really what it is, and I know we've received some comments via our constituents and community members today that was forwarded to us. And we want to just reiterate, this is only for moving forward, for for subdivisions and projects moving forward. Anything that's been existing or is currently being built, it doesn't apply to them. Now, with that being said, we would hope that communities and our residents of Hideout would kind of follow this, because it helps protect your home. And I think that's the biggest thing that we're really trying to do and get at, is that we have that defensible space between the house and the tree canopy, which is 10 foot. If you look in that little second drawing there, it's 10 foot from your house canopy to basically the tree canopy. And then from the bottom of the tree canopy, it should be a minimum of 6 feet from the bottom to the ground. And then just kind of clearing out just any fuel, that is ignitable fuel that can burn, and kind of keeping that as clear as possible. And so I know some of our lots don't have a lot of space in their community or on their property. And so again, I think the biggest thing, and Troy, just kind of jump in maybe if I'm saying this wrong, or maybe needs to be a little bit clearer, but keeping that 10 foot, between the house and the tree, and then another 10 foot between maybe another set of trees and vegetations, that will really help protect homes moving forward. So again, my staff, including my inspectors, they've gone through, and we've met with the fire district on this and know what to look for future inspections, and in regards to landscaping plans that may be submitted for future subdivisions and projects. So Troy, anything that I've kind of missed or missed out on? And then I do want to bring in Thomas, who's going to talk maybe a little bit about, kind of our the moderate to high to extreme, the types of
definitely want to do that, because I know you guys worked on that to do an assessment of some of the subdivisions that's required.
Correct. Yeah. So I'll bring him in and we'll kind of talk about that. Troy, is there anything that I need to set a little bit clearer there for you or anything?
No, you hit it perfectly. Thank you.
Well, we've been going over this for a couple of weeks, and so I wanted to make sure I'm clear, because I'm the one who has to disseminate this, like I said, to my team, and knowing what we're looking for moving forward. So Thomas, let's talk a little bit about Mayor, if you want to go down just one more page if you can there, the difference between the class 1, 2, and 3 ignitions. And so and Thomas, I'll jump in if I say any of this wrong, but a lot of our new construction has to deal with fire rating between walls and garages and windows and roofing structures and decking structures. And so a lot of that, we're going to be, our building officials or our building code reviewers will actually be the ones who kind of but review those plans, and we'll be able to work with the homeowners or the developers in telling them, okay, hey, listen, your deck may be a class 3, right? Or, we change it out to the Trex deck instead of having a wood deck. And so the building group is going to be able to work with homeowners who are building, whether it's developer or not, and just say, hey, listen, you're falling in this class 1, 2, or 3 construction standard, and here's what will need to happen if you do fall in that area. Thomas, any thoughts, or did anything you want to add to that in regards to ignition resistant construction?
No, I think Tim, I think you covered it. I think that's exactly right. I know that when you adopt a WUI, you do try to hit these classes, and I had walked through the scoring sheet just kind of as a sample for some of the different neighborhood subdivisions in the community to see where they would score, and I could walk through that if you guys have an interest in that. But no,
I think that would be great, Tom.
Yeah. If you can just give us a brief overview of kind of like maybe what you found in some of the, I think we talked about 3 communities, but just kind of maybe talk about 2, and just that way council and mayor and some of our residents who actually had questions about this tonight maybe feel a little bit more comfortable about what we're trying to pass.
Sure. So I tried to take a general look at three of the neighborhoods. One was Deer Springs, one was Rustler, and one was Soaring Hawk. So when I walked through the Deer Springs, I don't think you guys have the scoring sheet in front of you. I mean, I guess I could share this. Do you want me to share my screen with you?
Yeah, I would, Thomas. I think that'd be great.
Let me open this up.
We won't make fun of your chicken scratches or anything.
Come on. I did this in PDF, so it's much better than if it were just me. So here you could see one of the forms. Can you all see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so this was for Deer Springs MDA. I kind of had to approach this generally because typically this form is done on a lot by lot basis as people come in to develop. But you could see that you get points, you get additional points for the more challenging site that you have. And so, and you get to the bottom, you are hoping that you have lower points rather than higher points. And so for Deer Springs, for example, there's one primary road through the community. It is 20 feet or more. That's a good thing. So it only scores 1 point. Again, up here, 2 primary roads, you only score 1 point. That is a significant reduction as opposed to 1 road, or even worse, 1 lane in, 1 lane out. You could see that the newer subdivisions do meet the 45-foot or greater turnaround radius for cul-de-sacs. They do have street signs. The Deer Springs does not have any tall trees or any dead woods, so it scores relatively low. Deciduous trees near the buildings. Topography typically runs about 21 to 30%. That scores them about 10 points. Lower percent slope, lower grades actually work to your advantage. Higher grades score you more points. They're more challenging. Roofing material. I actually had reached out to our building permit review person to try to make sure that I understood this correctly. I have to confirm, I have not yet heard back from him, or I did hear back from him, but I have not heard back from 2 of the builders to confirm Class A fire rated roofing material. But my understanding is that asphalt shingles metal typically fall under Class A. That's most of our roofing material in the community, with the exception, no, I think that's actually almost all of our roofing material. And so that scores quite well. Water source, I reviewed the town's GIS mapping to measure distances between fire hydrants. Almost in every, I think in every case, we're somewhere between 200 and 400 feet. So we score well there. Siding and decking, we typically have, not in Deer Springs, non-combustible siding, hardy board, but there are some combustible decks that are wood. So you get an extra 5 points for that. And then Deer Springs has 1 underground, 1 above ground utility, so it scores 3. The total here, as you can see, is 60 points. That puts it in the moderate hazard. In my experience, that's probably the more likely rating for most subdivisions. It's hard to fall below moderate. I mean, they typically fall in moderate, which kind of makes sense in our environment with slopes, et cetera. It's hard to get much lower than that. So this one is pretty good. Deer Springs is a moderate hazard. You would hope for less, but that's not a half bad score.
Better than I would have expected, actually.
Rustler, I won't go through each one again. You guys can take a look at it. This one scored a little bit higher. It's got the narrow road going in and out. It's got dead end with greater than 200 feet in length of right-of-way. And it does have some non-combustible siding and combustible decking. I'm sorry, combustible siding and combustible decking. So I add some points there. This one scored in the 79 range, which puts it at a high hazard. But with the narrow roads, the topography up there, maybe that is not terribly surprising. And then Soaring Hawk. This one scored a little bit, this one scored higher than say Deer Springs, and most of the reasoning for that dealt with some of the road infrastructure and just the slopes, but it was also moderate, but it was getting on the high side of moderate. And again, the dead end road with greater than 200 feet in length, that adds 10 points. Any questions on that?
Well, Thomas, the street signs, present and approved, does that just mean the names of the roads?
My understanding is that is the names of the roads so that people know how to navigate in case there were an emergency.
Correct. And Troy might jump in on this.
Oh, sure. Yeah, please jump in.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I had understood when I was looking through all of this is that it's consistent with the county database and GIS database, because that's what fire, if they say, okay, hey, I'm at Soaring Hawk Lane, and I'm just throwing out an imaginary name, whatever, I can't, Hideout Lane, they know exactly where that's at because it's based on the county GIS database and the mapping databases that emergency services have. And so, Troy, hopefully I said that correctly, but so yeah, so as long as present and approved, that's kind of why those signs are there, and it's 0.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Sorry, this is Troy. A couple of just some clarifications on this form. Section B, the vegetation plan, that's more lot specific than it is subdivision wide. So when somebody submits their plan and the landscaping plan, it's kind of a mixture of proposed landscaping and existing landscaping on that lot. So those numbers could vary just depending on, what type of vegetation they're going to plant, or, if it's deciduous or conifers, and then what's actually on the lot, not necessarily the subdivision.
And I had a quick question on that to make sure I looked at this correctly. When you get down into the defensible space down here for lot specific, does the 30 to 70% of lots completed mean those lots around me? I am actually looking at my lots and the lots around me, or is it subdivision wide?
No, it's basically just the building lot that they're building on. If you look at it, it says lot specific. And technically, if you have a half-acre lot and you put a 4,000 square foot home on it, that's going to take up a majority of the vegetation on that half-acre lot. So a lot of that is going to bump it back down to that 70% or more lot.
So in that case, it's kind of 30 to 70%, that middle one, for example, 30 to 70% of the lot that has been impacted or developed. Is that what it's suggesting?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, we look at that and you can't really punish somebody for the whole neighborhood per se on that defensible space. So we always look at that as lot specific and not, the whole community wide.
Okay, that helps. Thanks.
So generally, overall, Mayor, I think if there's any questions that anybody would have, I mean, we'd love to answer it, and like to see adoption of this ordinance moving forward for tonight. So thank you for your time, and all three of us, I guess, Thomas, myself, and Troy are available for any questions.
And sorry, real quick, this is Troy. We just want to make a clarification. It says on the agenda, the adoption of the 2016 Wildland Urban Interface Code. It's actually the 2006 Urban Interface Code. That is the one that the state recognizes, not the 2016.
Okay, yeah, and Troy, you're right. You actually texted me, and I still forgot. But yeah, so we'll make a quick change on that, Mayor, if it does get approved with Alicia at the for the minutes and for the ordinance if it gets adopted.
So Troy, this is Ralph speaking. By the way, Thomas, thanks for that, because I know I was trying to get some kind of random survey. So that's really cool to have some input across 3, subdivisions, even though Rustler scored at a 79, so to speak. But in any case, hey, Troy, do we do this? Do we fill this out when someone comes in? I mean, there's like a, do this in a preliminary? Do we do it, pre and post for a development? How does that work?
So typically it's going to be per building permit. The applicant would gather the forms, fill out that form to the best of his knowledge, submit a landscaping plan that coincides with that hazard severity form. And then the fire district gets that, we review it. If there's any changes, then we do the markup, send it back to the builder. And, he could always call, and we're always willing to answer any questions, but it's typically at the beginning of the building permit process.
Do you then go back and check to see if that met it, or, maybe they made some improvements? Just kind of curious if you do, you do it before, but, do you do it after to check things out? And so that's one question anyway, Troy.
Yeah, so the way it works right now with the county and Heber City is we do an initial plan review, like I was just talking about. And then before they're granted final from the building permit, we go out and do an on-site inspection and just make sure the vegetation that's on the lot matches the plan that was submitted and there's no violations within the code.
Gotcha. And then who pays for this? Is it the applicant, so to speak, the builder? Or is there any charge at all?
So as far as it goes with the county, I think there is a fee that goes with the building permit for the urban interface portion. The builder pays for it.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. You said you met with the different HOAs, like the Community Preservation Association. What did they actually say? Are they going to agree to go along with this as well? Because their design review guidelines are not exactly the same as what is in here. And I don't.
Yeah, that's a great question. I asked 4 times if anybody had any questions in our meeting, and nobody responded at all. So I will take that as hopefully I did a great job in explaining everything, and we had no questions or concerns. But yes, when we did talk with everyone, there was no comments at all from anybody, either during the recorded meeting or after the meeting via email.
Tim, did you meet with the board?
No, we had a Zoom meeting with everyone, and so I'm not familiar with who all was on. I know Alicia got the names of everybody who was there, so I can't answer that question, Chris. I don't know who that would be, but we had Alicia. We probably had what, 8 to 10 people.
Melissa Davidson from Mustang. I'm sorry, from Community Preservation was there.
Yep. Yeah, and yeah, so we had a pretty good representation from everybody.
Okay, I guess my concern is, I think we definitely need something like this. My only concern is it's already challenging to build here with the guidelines. And if you don't follow the landscaping plan that they want, and then you change it to meet this fire code, then you might not get your deposit back, or you have delays in your CO and your building and all of that. So I don't want to make it harder for people to build here.
And just for clarification, if the town were to enact this, the town code would take precedence over the subdivision regulations. So.
Okay.
Yeah, so what happens if you have a finding of, extreme hazard or something like that? Is there, is there something that says, well, you need to at least get down, to a mid-level or something like that? Is there any teeth behind this?
So pretty much what they can do is when you start getting into the high and extreme hazard, it ups your defensible space requirement. So moderate's 30 feet, high is 50 feet, and 100 feet for high, and then extreme is 100, excuse me. And then there's differentiating things in the building code that would require them to do class A, B, C construction. I would have a very hard time seeing any structure within that town getting into even the high, just because the lots aren't super big. Usually when you get into that kind of situation, you're looking at, Wolf Creek Ranches, 160 acre lots, just bigger lots.
So just
And old subdivisions that don't have water systems or roads that are up to date. That kind of stuff would drive that to extreme or high hazard.
so just sorry, go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah, just to finish my question up here. Does anything impact your homeowner's insurance, or, in the case of a HOA where they're, you're grouping your property insurance, is any of this positively or negatively impacted?
What affects our homeowners insurance, Ralph, is the fact that the state took away the mandatory fire suppression systems, and that upped everybody's insurance. Whether you have a suppression system or not, they rank the entire community as because of the code in the state. So that's one of the things that would be really nice to have back. And I don't know, Troy, if your guys' efforts with our friends at the State House have had any forward motion in getting that to come back so we can actually put sprinklers back in.
So this is Clint, Fire Marshal with the Fire District. So there hasn't been any really progress on requiring sprinklers systems in single family dwellings. And to kind of go back to the question of your insurance, to date, I only just had one call recently of an area with a high hazard that was going to impact their insurance rates. But as we see with these large scale fires in California, Montana, Texas, and that, where we're getting a lot of destruction, that is the direction that some insurance companies are going, that if you're not meeting a wildland urban interface code, it could negatively impact you. But to date, I don't know that anybody's really enforcing it, but it does tend to be what we're seeing, the direction of insurance companies with these large loss fires that we're experiencing throughout the nation.
I can tell you, Ralph, that my insurance company refused to renew us. Not because I had a claim, but because they don't want to deal with the wildland urban interface.
They want you to have it?
They don't want properties inside the wildland urban interface.
I see. Yeah.
They told me I
Wow.
had to clear 100 feet, and I said I don't have 100 feet. That's in my neighbor's yards, and I have to take down their trees. And they said we're not renewing you.
Wow.
No kidding.
And I don't.
Okay.
And I'm not and my property doesn't fall into high hazard.
No.
And that's one clarification we could bring with that 10-foot and 30-foot defensible space. Code's only going to require you to maintain 10 feet or to your property line. So if that 100 feet goes across, that's not something we're not going to require a property owner to go on the adjoining lot to maintain it. So that is one clarification I'd like to bring up.
And just to clarify something else, so all of these things in here, when you're going to build a new house, you don't have to do everything that you suggest. You just want to keep your score as low as possible when you look at the final score, correct?
Correct. The score so your fire flow and everything goes towards how much defensible space you need or are required to. And then also as you get higher, code requires you go from class C to class B to class A fire rating, depending on your hazard. Obviously the higher hazard needs more fire resistant construction, hence the dimensional lumber on decks or enclosing the decks or metal roofs, and it increases the requirements per the hazard.
Okay. So I think the purpose, is to give, in my mind, our goal here is to give our homeowners, home builders, future home builders, the information they need to make good decisions around own construction plans, working with their architects and their builders, and trying to come up with something that puts them in the, no higher than the moderate category, ideally, so that they can, have some comfort based on, the fire district's abilities to come and help in when there is an incident and they're needed. I do have a couple of comments, I guess, that we should do for follow-up. One is, Tim, you'll know this because we've been on the phone with our friends at Rocky Mountain Power. The main lines through Hideout, the high tension lines through Hideout are lines that the RMP will take out of service in case of fire to help reduce the spread of fire. So even if the fire is not here, if it's like a high wind situation, and there's concern, they learn from some of the other fires around that turning off the high tension lines reduces the ability of fire to start in case those things come down. And so I would think we need to talk to RMP and see. Does that do anything to our water system, for example, if they cut that off? I think that's a really good question.
Yeah, and we need to talk with them. And there's some things that we still need to address that we will work towards in regards to if we do lose power, what type of generator or backup system do we have to make sure everything is still running and providing service. And so even during a fire, it's hugely important. So we need to still address some of those comments, as we're talking about potential stuff with Rocky Mountain Power to have that moved, or having kind of.
We need to understand what we need to do to. Do that.
Yep.
So this is, I'm taking comments from the community people that are on tonight. I'm happy to do that because this is new to everyone, and I want to make sure people have a chance to understand it and raise their questions. So if you've got a question on this particular topic, even though we said we don't take public input because this is new and we've been trying to get it socialized out there. Anybody who has questions on it can certainly raise your hand and we'll let you deal with that. Brett, I see you have a hand. So if you want to hand up, go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm certainly, like Sherry mentioned, I'm also all for trying to help reduce risk and protect our homes. I do have some very significant concerns, and one of which I think there may be some misunderstanding on part of somebody, which may be myself. So I'd love clarification on that as to the scope and applicability of this. And so in particular, maybe if you want to share it on your screen, if somebody can, and go to section 601.1.
I can do that. Just give me a second.
And while Mr. Mayor's bringing that up, for the sake of time here, I'll just sort of continue. That paragraph actually does say that this applies to and existing building structures and premises located within the wildland urban interface area. So chapter 6 does apply to all existing spaces, not just new construction and building permits, but all spaces. And then later within almost to the right, adjacent to paragraph 601.1, it says persons owning, leasing, controlling, operating, maintaining defensive places are responsible for modifying or removing. And so essentially the way I read it is this chapter 6 and creating defensible space would apply to everybody in the town of Hideout, existing and new construction.
That's a really good question because that's not what I've been told. So
is that clear from, I guess I asked for clarification from those who've been presenting so far on this topic, who are far more experts than I am, if I'm understanding chapter 6, paragraph 601.1 correctly.
This is Clint with Wasatch Fire. So in the intent, what we're looking at now is kind of a rough draft, just a presentation we threw together in the intent in the beginning of the code. It's very specific and it's for only new or structures that are altered. So we're not going to go retroactive. It talks about the adoption, about how it's not a retroactive code. We'd obviously encourage and we want to educate and inform and work with Hideout Town for everything before, but this isn't something that we enforce retroactively.
Well, every section, every chapter has its own scope. And so while I do understand the scope in chapter 1, the section 101 general section, I think it was, I think that's where it was. Pardon me, I don't have that at my fingertips right now exactly. To me, when I read it, every chapter has its own scope, and therefore that scope applies to items in that chapter, and chapter 6 should be clearly revised before the town would consider adopting this. The other related chapter paragraph is actually, if we scroll up to 101.4, and that paragraph also, to me, it's on the very first page, kind of partway down on the left column. That paragraph is specifically on retroactivity. And I have concern about the last part of what is a rather long sentence. But if we carefully look at that sentence, this code shall apply to the conditions arising after adoption thereof. I like that. Comma, conditions not legally in existence at the adoption of this code. So that would mean if somebody's in violation of an existing building permit, I imagine, comma, and so I'm fine with that as well. This third part is what I have most concern about. To conditions which, in the opinion of the code official, constitute a distinct hazard to life or property. So it's entirely up to the code official to decide where retroactivity can apply. And that seems to me that would supersede anything and give full discretion to code official to make any of this retroactive to anything they choose to, if they can justify it has a distinct hazard to life or property. And so I have a lot of concern over the retroactivity of that provision. I would also, highly encourage town council to significantly revise or very clearly clarify that nothing in this, any of the what's adopted is intended to be applied and shall never be applied to any existing development that's already been approved by building permit. I want to comply with this as much as I can to a reasonable degree in my development that I've got a project under construction. But this would also effectively remove most trees in Rustler because it is in a higher classification. You have to have a defensible space that would extend quite large. There also are not lots in Rustler, so I'm not sure how this would apply to the pods in various parts of, say, Glistening Ridge. There's pods. Rustler is one massive pod. And so I think there needs to be some clarity on those types of things. I've got a few more comments here, but I'd be happy to pause. I don't want to go on and have us lose track of some of these clarifications.
Yeah, Brett, if you wouldn't mind, this is Chris. I'd just like to talk about a quick scenario. So I'm not as concerned about allowing the fire official, or I forget what the language is because I'm not looking at it, but let's look at this as an example. Someone plants a tree on their lot that's perfectly within code now, but then that tree grows, and then the crown of the tree suddenly starts encroaching in that 10-foot fenceable space of the neighboring property. And that neighbor wants that tree to be cut back or cut down, but because it's not on their lot, they really have no recourse without the ability to kind of appeal to that official who could then make the determination if it was a particular hazard in that situation. I mean, I'd like to actually see some room there for the ability of someone on one side of a property line who has one opinion and someone on another side of a property line who has another opinion to come to a resolution. that makes sense and obviously has safety in mind first and foremost.
So let me clarify my understanding. I think I heard a defensible space of 10 feet. There is no defensible space of 10 feet. The moderate hazard starts at 30 feet from any structure, and the high hazard is 50 feet.
Yeah.
So with
if you go back-
Rustler being
yeah,
with
go back
Rustler
to
being in
the,
a high.
If you go back to the diagram, I think Tim presented it first thing.
That means that you must have 10 feet between the crown of each tree and 10 feet from the building to any tree. But the defensible space in 603.2 means that if there is a tree that is 20 feet from your home and you're a moderate hazard, that tree is 20 feet from your structure. It's a single tree, no other tree around it within 10 feet. That tree is within the defensible space. That tree must have all limbs trimmed within 6 feet of the ground. That will probably kill most trees in Hideout because we don't have trees that could survive well without the bottom branches. We don't have many trees over 15 feet in Hideout. So that will effectively kill most trees within 30 feet of any structure. And that is the smallest, and 50 feet of any structure in Rustler, because as Thomas so graciously did kind of a back of the napkin initial assessment, or I should say more than back of the napkin, of an initial assessment from his observation. Rustler could not have any tree with branches lower than 6 feet within 50 feet of any of those structures. And most every one of those trees will probably die because of that, in my opinion. But let's move on from the trees. The 403.6 calls for address markers at the approach or the entrance of any driveway. I'd like to see more definition of the address markers and what they are. I fear they'll be able to just be destroyed by the snow plowing. I feel that many, unless they're about 6 feet tall, could be rendered useless in the winter months with snowbanks. And I feel like if addresses are readily visible day and night from the street, that there should be an exemption to having address markers. I've seen communities that have these. They look horrible. And I think there's other ways to go about it than mandating address markers as is stated in 403.6. And I'm not even sure how they would practically work here without some more discussion and definition.
All right, so I can comment on that as well. Like I've lived in other states and, sometimes on the curb, they put the house number on it so that if there's an emergency responders can find the correct house. I think here, we don't have a lot of street lighting on purpose. And it is sometimes pretty hard to figure out what address is what. We know that. I know that because FedEx sometimes can't find my house. Even though I've got a marker, I actually have an address marker within permanently posted at the driveway entrance. But still, I mean, this is all about safety, right? And, appropriate response to an emergency. I think as far as aesthetics, we can work out aesthetics of what an address marker is, but I tell you what, I believe everybody's house number should be visible and available, and so that a first responder doesn't have to spend time trying to figure out, where the emergency is based on the address.
And Chris, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I just think that some of the address markers that are at the curb, one on Lower Lasso Trail, is completely covered all winter. So all I'm asking for is some better definition around what an address marker is. Painting on the curb wouldn't work here for many months out of the year. It would be completely ineffective. Address markers that I've seen elsewhere are stakes in the ground, which would probably be destroyed by the snow plowing here. So I'm just saying more definition around the address marking and consideration of whether when an address mark is on the structure already and is clearly transparently visible day and night, that should be considered to be an amendment here, an exception like other sections have, that they would not be required to have an additional marker at the curb. I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying about finding locations and so forth. So my next comment was on chapter 5. And it's really a broad comment. I would really like to see the town of Hideout, maybe in connection with this, limit an HOA's ability to restrict fire retardant siding. The fiber cement siding that Community Preservation Association restricts the use of and will not allow when it mimics the look of wood. I would love to see the town of Hideout take some action that limits the HOA's ability from forcing us all to put, combustible wood, even though it can be treated, on the outside of our houses. I would love to see that. So I strongly encourage, maybe this is a great opportunity to do that. 601.1 I've referenced already. 604.4 again talks about the tree crowns within the defensible space pruned, and I mentioned the limbs with 6 feet of the ground. I would encourage the council to take a look at the trees around and consider whether within 30 feet of every structure, and that would be in a moderate risk area, those trees could survive losing limbs below 6 feet. I'm also very much struggling with the gamble oak or scrub oak is considered a tree by all definitions I've seen. I'm not sure how to deal with that, to remove all branches 6 feet from the ground on that type of material. I've been asked to try to preserve as much scrub oak as I can on the lot that I'm developing, both by the DRC, the Design Review Committee, which is part of the HOA, as well as actually by members of the town during the site visit. In a pre-construction site visit, was asked to preserve as much as possible of the scrub oak to not disturb it and kill it. So that could be very challenging, because that's really our predominant tree, is the gamble oak or scrub oak here, more than any other tree. I feel like this was written for areas of Wasatch County that maybe have a lot of conifer trees, but doesn't seem to really contemplate much here. So I think that would essentially eliminate most all trees within 30 feet of any structure. I'm not sure that that's the look that we want to have in the town of Hideout. Again, it's balancing look with safety. I know there's a balance. I'm not saying that that the look should trump and put us at great risk, but I think we've got to consider that.
Mayor, if I could jump in really quickly here, just to clarify,
Sure.
I think it'd help the discussion. The town can't pass an ordinance that is retroactive, and so that can't happen. This was a model language that was taken, and so it's a work in progress. And so I think it'd be helpful if people have concerns to send those to town staff, and we can work on implementing those. And then as far as the property goes, just to clarify that, if there's a tree on one property owner's property, the owner of the property controls that tree. And if it encroaches across the property line, then the adjoining property owner, it would be a trespass to that adjoining property. And so with that being said, I think the retroactive stuff isn't a concern, because the town can't enforce that retroactively.
In the fire district, through enforcing this throughout the county, we've never gone retroactive. We've had it started in 2006 in Wasatch County. We got it a few years ago in Heber City. We're not about going, and if you've lived in your house, I mean, even one day prior to the adoption, we're not going to go and start enforcing this retroactively, because like the gentleman just stated, it's not in force until it's adopted. And that's not the position of the fire district, to go back and force people to apply a code that wasn't applicable when they built their home.
I totally respect those comments. I think then the code should be updated to reflect that, because the way it's written right now, that's not what it says. So I think it's important that the intent be reflected in the writing of it. A102.2.
Got most of your stuff out on the table tonight, or does you have more to say?
A102.2 would further the width of the driveways. And there's a lot of lots that are not built. I mean, if I look around just in Glistening Ridge, there's a lot of lots that if this goes even on just new construction, it will effectively clear cut most of that gamble oak. 30 feet of any structure, and some of those may be within the next rating, which I think is
So what I'd like
50
to
feet.
suggest is that
In reference to the scrub oak, we enforce it at a 10 foot from the structure, because as you stated, it's nearly impossible to trim scrub oak up 6 feet high. You were correct earlier that you're talking about if it's a pine tree or if it's something that has limbs that can be trimmed, that's where that 30-foot radius, 6 feet high. But as far as scrub oak, that's always just been enforced at the 10-foot and then thin it out if it's extraordinarily thick.
I understand that's the practice that's been taken, but that's not what the words actually say. And so words have meaning, and I certainly want to encourage town council to only adopt something that has their true intent written in the words and the intent reflected in the words. I think that's critically important.
Give me a chance here. I'd like to suggest that I think you made some very good points tonight. I think you're right. I think because 5 years from now, we'll have different people in all the different roles. And, you know, someone will come along and say, oh, it says here, I can do this. So I want to do this. So I think we have to go back around one more time and identify those places where retroactivity, as you mentioned, comes into place. 101.4, 601, 403, you know, I think we need to do that. And I think we probably have to go back to the HOAs one more time, because the fact that they didn't say anything worries me, Tim, that they didn't understand that you know, when we do this, it trumps their design standards. And so I think we have to go back and make that clear. So I mean, my recommendation would be that we go back and do a bit more work on this and clarify line by line, be comfortable with what's in there, and not just work on the fact that we have an agreement with the district that, you know, that they're not going to enforce X, Y, and Z, but that the language actually matches. That's my recommendation. I think it'll come back and bite us, and not in the short term, but it's
well, and I think the town would be remiss if they were to approve a building permit that had a landscape design plan that wasn't in accordance with the written word here, even if that's not the typical way that it's been enforced. A couple more comments here quickly. A103.4.
Get to some others, Brett. I'm going to take it back 3. So if you wouldn't mind, if you've got other sections you want us to look at, just send us a note with that, because I really need to let some other people talk, and B, get on with the session. So I'm not trying to cut you. I'm not trying to not hear from you, but I've already committed that we're going to go back and review it. So if you just share any other sections that you have concerns about, I'll make sure we look at those as well.
I will share those as long as I'll email those to the town council, as long as those are also published as part of the record, since they won't be in the recording.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dawn.
Thank you. I think this has been a very rich discussion and very important, because fire safety around our homes is very important. I have relatives who have owned or do own properties in California in rural areas, and my brother living in the Sierra foothills can't get fire insurance there because of the risk there. And so I think this is very important to keep in mind, that, you know, defensible spaces and all the other things we've been talking about tonight are very important, not just for the individual, but also for the community. And I'll be brief with the rest of my comments. So we're in the process. We're living in Soaring Hawk and have a home that we built, and we've been living in since July, and we're going to be submitting a landscape plan that's based upon changes having to do with the change in our terrain and whatnot. That was a result of excavation and whatnot. So my question is we have to put in a landscape plan change to the CPA, the Community Preservation Association Design Review Committee, and we want to kind of be able to negotiate this and not have to put in several different review plans, because they're $500 a piece every time we have to put one in. So I just want some guidance on how we negotiate that. We want to be very, fire safe here, But, you know, the DRC may want us to plant things closer to the house than is recommended by the Wasatch Fire District. Any comments?
I think Cameron has commented on that already, our attorney. If we were to adopt this, then this supersedes the HOA.
So I think, yeah, but I mean, unfortunately, I'm not convinced that, you know, I was not, I'm no disrespect at all meant, because I know Tim and Troy went and talked about this with the HOA members, HOA leadership folks, but I'm not sure. The fact that we didn't hear anything back makes me wonder if they haven't really digested it yet. And it might be worth going back one more time to make sure they understand it. Because, you know, basically we're suggesting that we want to give people the option to get as close to the ideal, you know, as they'd like to get. And that will conflict with current HOA design review guidelines for landscape. So I hear you. I don't know, but we're gonna have to make some changes anyway. And Cameron, or Paul, I don't know. You know, I'm afraid. I guess we'll just deal with the fact that as soon as this is adopted and somebody submits to the HOA and they say it's not good, we don't like it, we're going to have to get involved with that. The town's going to get dragged into every one of those. I don't know what thoughts we have around that.
And I think if you wanted to hold off and make amendments to it, that's certainly not a bad choice. It's better to have as close to a final version as we can. Ultimately, it's the town's choice on what standards they want to put in place, and these are only going to be affecting new construction that occurred after this is put in place.
I understand that, but let's do a hypothetical. So after we adopt this, and homeowner says, "Great, I'm comfortable with. I like the idea. I want to make my home as safe as possible, and I want to go in with a landscape plan that adheres to whatever you guys passed as best as I can, given my lot and my space." And they go to their design review committee, and the design review committee says, "Not good enough. I want trees here, here, and here, and I want a fence over here, and whatever." And then they're going to come. First thing they're going to do is come to the town and say, "Help me," because I did what you guys asked, and the HOA doesn't agree. And so one of the things we have to think about is the fact that we're going to get dragged into discussions with HOAs around design reviews once we adopt this. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm just saying we need to have some kind of standard response for all those HOAs until they get trained that this trumps whatever they'd like.
And so the HOA could be more restrictive than this, but they could not be less restrictive. So in other words, the HOA for new construction couldn't require trees where the town ordinance restricted those trees. And so there is that potential conflict, but in the conflict, the town ordinance would prevail.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking, so I understand that. I'm just saying it's going to be another thing we have to deal with, along with people who want to put in hardy board and, as a way to help mitigate their fire risk, et cetera. It's just one more thing for us to think about. I'm not suggesting we don't do this. I just think we've got to be prepared once we do, because it's going to happen.
Thank you. And I agree with Phil and with Brett about the hardy board. I would have put in hardy board instead of wood because of, my experiences in California. And I wasn't able to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, I would have put in metal soffits and fascias, but they wouldn't let me, so.
Well, so you're kind of
I'm sorry.
You're kind of saying, I hear that there are some things that we people that are fire-minded don't like about the design guidelines for the HOA. So at what point do we think this ordinance, so I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but we're here to consider whether or not we're going to adopt the 2006 Wildland Urban Interface Code in its Appendix C, which we didn't write, right? This is what's been adopted by the state.
Right.
And we're not rewriting it. We're either adopting it or we're not adopting it. Is that correct?
Well, the town could certainly make amendments, and I appreciate you mentioned 2006. To clarify, that's the version that we're approving. The agenda said 2016 version. I think it's the 2006 that we're dealing with. But yes, the town could amend it either now, tonight, or later on at a later time. But the state has adopted this version, yes.
With this language.
Correct.
We could adopt it and then amend it. And then we're in that uncomfortable, zone where we've adopted something, but, there's still some, good questions coming from the community about it. At what point do we just say, it's not perfect, but it's certainly better than what we have now, which is nothing. So at what point do we just say, okay, we're gonna make these 10 amendments, and then that's good for now, and we're going to adopt it and we're going to enforce it.
I think we need to make a few of those amendments first, such as the language that Brett suggested about the retroactivity. I think that's important because it does say one thing, even though everyone's saying they don't enforce that. I do think that's important to change. Also, I know we can't do anything retroactive, but is there any way to put anything in there about people should be responsible in existing homes for their, somebody has dead brush all over their yard or dead trees, big fire hazards. And according to this, nobody can really do anything about it. Is there a way to put something in there about that?
And Cameron, I mean, you probably may be able to speak, or Polly from the legal end, since it is the state, wording, that's why we did not change or get too involved in this. But I think, again, some amendments will be easy to handle and put in place. These comments that we've had have been great. And to talk about Sherry's last comment there, I think, from the town standpoint, again, we want to make sure that private, it's private property. And so we don't have the right to go in and, okay, hey, you haven't cleaned out this space and you haven't done this. And so I just want to make sure that, it doesn't state supersede most cities in some degrees on that.
Well, yeah, so typically state law would supersede the town's law, but I'm not aware that the state has mandated that this language apply to the town. They've just adopted the standard and have expressed a preference for it, is my understanding. And so I think it's fine if the town wants to amend the language. And to Councilmember Jacobs' question, the town has other ordinances separate from this that could address nuisances of, brush piles or things like that. So this is not the only enforcement mechanism that we would have for stuff like that.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess I need to know, Sherry would like us to make some amendments first. Chris, sounded like you were okay to pass it and make amendments later. Let me hear from the other council members where you guys are so we can figure out if we're going to vote for this tonight or defer.
Hey, Phil, this is Bob. I'd like to defer. This is opening up a huge can of worms. Particularly disconcerting, if I understood you correctly. You said your insurance company dropped your homeowner's policy because of what reason now?
They dropped me because I'm in a wildland urban interface and they don't want to be, and I was with State Farm or Allstate, one of them. and they kicked me out without a claim, without any issues. They just kicked me out and I had to go find new coverage.
Yeah, I have a feeling other residents could be in a similar situation. So I think we need to study this a little bit more. The principle is a very good idea. I agree with everything it's trying to accomplish, but I want to find out some of the unintended consequences. Particularly, I want to check with my own insurance company. I think the other residents probably ought to do that too.
Just yet, Bob.
I'm sorry, I talked over you. So say again.
No, I did talk over you. So you may not want to open that can of worms before you have to.
Yeah, that's
Don't ask them that.
and then the other thing here is that this brings up the issue of dealing with the HOA, and in my personal opinion, I think the HOA's guidelines for landscaping are not sufficient, and this is based on a professional various professional landscapers I've had come out when we were building our houses. So would there be any way where maybe we can, for lack of better words, take back control from the HOA and give it to the town as to what landscaping shall be mandated?
Well, for all intents and purposes, this will do that on future builds. And so that's what I want to go back and make sure that the HOA groups that we talk to understand that once this is put in place, they're going to have to modify what their landscape committees have been doing.
Yeah, I would be very much in favor of taking control from the HOA of our landscape and giving it to the town. I think it would be easier for all the residents. That's all I have to say about that. But I would like some more time to study the issue. I would move to defer this.
Carol, Ralph?
I would like to defer it as well. I would also like to suggest that Mr. Rudder maybe help as whoever is going to review this and rewrite it, that he be serving on that committee or giving his input. It seems to me he's gone over this with a fine-tooth comb, and I thought his suggestions were very useful, so that perhaps he could help as we do amend it.
And I'd be happy to do that, Carol.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I'm last here. I agree with the previous comments, Bill, along the lines where you're going, and Bob and Carol. Yeah, I think we need to take a little closer look at the words, because we may not, this entire group may not be here in 4 or 5 years. So someone's left holding the bag on, improper wording. Thank you, Brett, for all that input. I think it's valuable. One of the things I'd like to do is I'd like to understand if other towns around us have passed anything similar, and did they make any modifications? So, we're not the only one in this boat. There's other towns. Would love to see if there's some additional input we could get, or at least get a couple of samples of, was this passed as is? Was it passed with modification? And even to the point of, to your point, Phil, was, we could have a deluge of people coming in here, and we'd have to deal with all that. I'd say the more we can eliminate that, make it really clear, and hopefully find out maybe even how a couple of other towns dealt with this as well, would probably be useful for the next iteration.
And Councilman Severini, I think Troy could probably answer that. But as I was reviewing it, Park City has their own up on their website. Heber has their own up under the building website. They're going down into the Salt Lake Valley. I know Riverton has one. And so it's pretty, and Salt Lake City or Salt Lake County, I can't remember. I think it's Salt Lake City has their own. So The minor changes that they did were really talking more about what is allowed in landscaping. You know, what type of landscaping would be allowed in certain areas. But Troy may be able to speak, like I say, better to that because he has to be in it from his end for the Wasatch from Wasatch County.
So this is Clint, just to kind of interject on the comments of going through an alternate. We don't have any concern with putting something about the retroactivity. Our interpretation is that the authority having jurisdiction in 101.2, it talks about new constructions, alterations, and additions. We've never interpreted it that it's retroactive, but if we need to add some sort of language, we're more than happy to put that in because that's been our stance since 2006 when it was adopted in the county. And just to clarify, the insurance isn't dropping because of the adoption of the code. It's the lack of defensible space. So it's not the code that's causing it. It's the reaction of these large loss fires throughout the country.
Exactly. No, it has nothing to do with the code. You're right, Clint. I was trying to wasn't clear on that, but I should have been. Yeah, they're just dropping anybody who lives near wildland because they don't want the risk. So I think if I lived in southern Utah, I wouldn't have any problems because there's not so much wildland in Moab. At least not the kind that burns.
Hey, look, if they're dropping somebody like you and in Hideout, what are they doing in Summit Park or Upper Pine Brook? You know, those are way worse.
I don't know, Chris. I don't live there, but I'm just saying they refuse to, and it's in this. I say it was either Allstate or State Farm. I can't remember which one I was with. I think it was Allstate. They just, it's Allstate. They just wouldn't do it.
All right. Well,
at least not for me.
So do we have like a timeline for going back and making amendments? Because I would hate for this to meet the fate of some other things that we've been trying to push through, which just drag on forever. Can we establish a timeline and maybe some participation from the council, as well as, Brett and anyone else who, is passionate about this and wants to get involved?
I mean, Tim, I don't think there was really, it's really not as much as it sounded like. I think this is probably a few hours of work to grab those sections and tweak them slightly. Ideally, I'd like to see it come back for the April meeting.
Yeah, I mean, and I can get with Cameron and Cameron and Clint or Troy can sit down and just make sure we go over this with a fine tooth comb with the comments that everybody's brought up tonight. And I know that we've had some emailed comments, and so we'll address those as they are appropriate and are legal. And so we will definitely do that. And I don't see a problem having this done and ready for the next meeting.
Can we have a council member volunteer to be part of that so that we can,
I would be happy to volunteer.
Oh, super, Sherry. You okay with that, Tim? I mean, if we have a council member there, then I think we can help Mike get to the finish line quicker.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you.
And Brett also is willing to participate, so let's be sure to include him. And that's plenty of committee.
We just need to keep in mind that this is mostly enforced throughout the county in a single family dwelling, but this does cover high hazard occupancies, commercials, cutting, grinding, welding, stuff like that. Would it be easier just to insert into each scope of each section that it's not retroactive? Because if we get to changing too much, we could also have unintended effects on other portions of it. But we're fully in support of adding it to each section to the scope and intent that it's not a retroactive from the adoption date. We're fully in support of that.
Well, I think, thank you, Clint. I think there's a few areas. I mean, I think we have to make a decision around the house numbering, which again, I think is high value, and you guys need to be able to see the house number when you come for sure. We need to decide how to do that. given the issues we have with snow and so forth. I mean, there's a lot of people have those lovely stones outside that, carved with their house numbers, but as mentioned, in the wintertime, they're gone. So.
And the house numbers, if I can speak to that, that kind of mirrors fire code. Basically, we use the 150-foot rule that fire code mentions, and it's up, granted, it's the fire code, the wildland code, building code, plumbing code. A lot of it's open to the interpretation of the authority having jurisdiction. But if we can see the address from the road when we do the inspection, this is more of if you've got an extra long, a 300, 400, 500 plus foot driveway that having attached to the structure isn't really the intent. And we work on a case by case with that through the interpretation of the code official.
If you have an estate lot and there's a half a mile of driveway, you need to know that. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So I think, again, just a little clarification sentence in there. We can fix a lot of those things with just a couple clarification sentences, like for driveways longer, more than 150 feet, you have to have this, you have to have these things and so forth. So I think it can be cleaned up pretty quickly for us, just in one more shot through. Okay, so we're going to get it back in April. Tim, you've got your marching orders.
Sounds good, Mayor. We'll me, Cameron, and Clint will and
the rest of the committee.
Jerry, the rest of the group, the rest of the group will get this going, and we'll get it back for next meeting.
Okay. I also would like to ask that we get it at least share with me the list of attendees from the HOA session, if you would, so I can reach out to them.
Yep, we can do that. And I think, again, you mentioned something earlier that I'll just reiterate. We need to, once we get this done, we'll reach out and we'll have another meeting with the HOA board and members and discuss it with them to make sure that they're aware of it and answer any questions that they may have at that time.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that but they also, that they understand clearly that this sits on top of anything that any HOA design review committee or landscape committee would do. So, so I'll work with Polly and Cameron to come up with a letter for them so they understand it. Thank you. This is fascinating and challenging and exciting for us. I appreciate everybody's attention to detail here. It's an important and challenging tool, and hopefully we'll get through it in the next month and be ready to get moving. Just in time for the new building permit season, ideally. Item 3, we are recommending removing that to April. The reason we're doing that is that we had a discussion with the auditors, and they are recommending some changes that so that we're in a better position going forward. And that shouldn't say it shouldn't really say the budget year ending 2023, because that budget doesn't exist yet. But so I don't want to change what we thought we needed to do until the auditors finish with their findings. So we expect to have that done over the next week or so, and then I think the 17th is the date we're going to have that sorted out. So I'm going to push that into the April meeting. We'll talk about that for April. Item 4.
We've got Aaron Wade from Gilmore and Bell on this call, and thank you for waiting this long.
Sorry, I didn't realize that, I would have changed the agenda order. I didn't realize that we had another, well, we would have put the fire department at late too, so it is what it is. All right. So do you want to do some background on this, Jan, before he kicks in, or how would you like to do that?
We've been working with the Economic Development Committee to come up with a policy regarding when and how the town evaluates a public infrastructure district application. I'm just going to let Aaron take it from here.
Well, before you do that, but at least please help us understand why we need a statement.
Why we need a policy?
Yeah.
You know, I think it helps with, you know, like having a general plan, having pre-thought out a reason why we would adopt a plan to use a PID ahead of people coming in and requesting. And just because we grant to one development doesn't mean we have to grant it to someone else. We need to be consistent with what our long-term motivation is. And I think Aaron has outlined some really good ideas in a policy here for our review.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Aaron, please.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. Yep, I just lost my cursor for a minute, so I couldn't find the mute button there. So I'm happy to share my screen, or we can look at yours. It might be best just to have the Word document because it kind of has the comments from.
I'll let you take it on then.
Okay, is that showing up for everyone?
It is. It might help
Perfect.
to make it a little bit
Yeah.
larger for some of the
Yeah, is that better for folks?
Yes, I think that helps.
So just on the back of what Jan had said and what we discussed with the committee. So I think there's been some presentations. I think Randy Larson from my office has presented to the city before on public infrastructure districts. It is a new tool. And so it's starting to gain some momentum in the state, being used elsewhere, and even being used, you know, in close to your community with the Mayflower development and Jordan L. Ridge on the other side over by Heber City. And so it's likely, and I think that more relevant, there's some requests bubbling in the city, and they likely won't be the first or only request. And so a policy, our recommendation is, it's not a state law requirement. It's like a lot of other types of policies, some of the policies you've been discussing tonight. It's a recommendation that you have this. And the reason why we would recommend it is there's going to be projects that a PID makes sense in the eyes of the council. And there's going to be some projects that the PID tool doesn't make sense for, and that are going to get a no answer. And so we thought, you know, our thought is it's great to have a policy in place, one, so that your staff knows what to do when you get an application, because whether or not you have a policy, property owners have their state statute that would allow them to at least make a request. And so it's good to have at least the ability to evaluate those requests and to know what to do with them. And then second, to establish criteria that the council can use and look to in evaluating, so that when you say yes to developer one and no to developer two, there can be some findings or some reasoning that you give, and also some tools that your staff can use to evaluate on the front end as they look to give recommendations to the council. So that's kind of just an overview, and I'm happy to answer any questions on the front end or just to dive right into this.
Dive right in. Let's
okay.
See what the meat is.
Yeah. All right. Well, and I think the idea for this is also not to, you know, section by section, but I will give you guys the overview here. So just by way of introduction, you know, the way that a request is made is by submitting a petition. And that's a state law requirement. But what we've added here is also that they provide a letter of intent. The petition requirement under state law gives really basic information about, you know, boundaries and who's participating, but doesn't really give you actually information about the development, the project, and things like that. So we would recommend that you also require a letter of intent get submitted that has actual information to help you evaluate the request, understand what they're looking for, and whether or not a PID is, you know, could or should be applicable. And so, here we have the background information, size, location, area. But also because the PID is used to fund infrastructure, they need to submit what they're looking to build, the regional and the localized improvements, a timeline, and importantly, a financial plan, right? Like it's reasonable that the city would want, or the town would want to be able to see what are the costs you're looking to fund? What are the revenue sources that you're looking to use? Is it tax? Is it assessment bonds? What's the mill levy you're looking for? And just some of that background information to give you the initial insight if this is something that's going to work or something that you're interested in. Other information like conflicts of interest disclosure, them being willing to pay the council fees and other things so that the town is not left on the hook for the professionals that they're engaging in this process. And as was mentioned by Jan, the group that's been set aside to review this is the Economic Development Committee. It's already a committee that's been formed, has some overlapping, responsibilities in this arena. So it's a nice fit. So they'll take the first review, and if they give the nod, then a governing document should be submitted to the city council and to the staff to review, which would actually outline the powers and limitations on the district. The next thing here that I'll quickly cover is fees. And I think the recommendation of staff was that the fees be included in the fee schedule, which I believe is actually your next item. And that way you can, adjust those however often the town would otherwise look at fees and adjust them without having to modify your policy. Not that it's difficult to modify the policy, but you might as well look at those fees at the same time as other fees. But there would be a fee at the time that the letter of intent is submitted. One, just to make sure that the city's expenses are being covered. And then second, there would be a fee at the time of a governing document, because again, that kicks off an additional review process. And the other item I wanted to flag is that, if the fees are not sufficient to cover the cost of the town's incurring, that those additional fees would be paid by the applicant as well. And that would include, my fee as your council, if you had a municipal advisor involved, if you had anyone else that's helping review this, the applicant is responsible to cover those fees to hold the town harmless in this process. The main thing I wanted, myself and staff wanted to discuss today was the criteria for evaluating the district. And this is something where we've enumerated a number of points here that you can see, but really just to give the council the ability to weigh in and let us know if these are the things you want to be using to evaluate, if you want it to look different. But we at least wanted some options out there to kind of give you an idea of what this could be. And many of these you'll see are actually taken pretty directly from your general plan that the town has adopted. And what I did is I took the goals section, each sub piece of the general plan has a goals section which outlines the actual what the city what the town wants to see as a result of the general plan, what they want to encourage and discourage. And so I've tried to incorporate that here so that you could lean on the general plan that a lot of work and time went into also in evaluating the districts here. And so I'll run through these because I think they're important to the staff, but please stop me if there's anything specific that you want to talk about. But here, the district is there to build infrastructure. And so the provision or contribution of needed regional or sub-regional infrastructure, maybe there's a water tank or a sewer line or something that is really needed by the town, and a PID could fund that or fund a piece of it or assist in the capital facilities needs of the town. And so maybe that's the criteria that's a positive for the district's application. Contributes to diversifying and solidifying the town's property tax or sales tax bases. Maybe there's some commercial development or hotel development or something that helps the bottom line of the city, helps you with some of your other goals, and also provides some diversification. This one taken right out of the general plan, but, regarding view sheds, green space, open space, and trails, promotes conservation and preservation. Mix of residential and commercial uses appropriate for the community. Moderate income housing. I know that that's a big topic in the state right now. So, if the council chose to adopt this criteria, someone that's proposing, moderate income housing would have some positive public benefit that could be found in determining to grant a PID. Again, taken from the general plan here, increasing the livability of the town by encouraging commercial uses with residential needs and enhancing gathering spaces, commercial uses, here, trails and transportation facilities, interaction with SR 248, expansion of current utilities to account for current and future population growth, well-planned annexations. Maybe it unlocks a key area that the town is interested in annexing or having be developed. And then also, this is one that I added that's not necessarily in your goals, but something that other cities are looking at is maybe not providing a PID just for ordinary residential development, but maybe requiring or looking for enhancements so that when the taxpayers who have this additional tax are looking at their tax bill and wondering why they have higher taxes than maybe a family member or friend who lives on the other side of town, they could point to tangible enhancements within their community that may justify an additional tax. Some people wanting to live in a higher amenitized community might be willing to pay higher taxes as a result. And then just some other additional things that we have in our base policy, including sustainable design, high quality design. So those were some of the items that was discussed with the staff, and then again taken from your general plan. But again, it's for discussion purposes and really want the feedback of the council on the criteria that they'd like.
I think it's great that you pulled the key elements of the general plan in. It could include, all kinds of things. As you say, I mean, we can encourage moving us forward, including, I just saw a comment pop up from someone like, EV charging, right? So, I mean, all car companies have converting to electric vehicles. We haven't put that into our code yet, but that's probably a great idea to suggest anything coming in the future when you have public parking of any kind, it has to have EV charging somehow, stuff like that. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, PID should be a win for the town, along with the development that it's for. And so I think that those kinds of emphasis and things you want to see certainly can be an ask when the town is negotiating a PID to say, hey, we know you're going to have this parking garage as part of your hotel or as part of your shopping center. We'd really like to see EV. Can you commit to that if you're granted a PID? And I think that's absolutely something that could be part of the discussion.
Can I ask a question here? This seems to be very economic development focused. When I think one of the reasons for the city to want a PID is because the city wants a particular type of development or needs something, right? Not, and is economic development committee the only driver here, or would we have other drivers here, maybe conservation drivers, or other kinds of items where maybe the numbers add up to one thing, let's say for development, like you'll get more diversification of revenue for the town, but is that the only reason to do something? I mean, do we just pave over everything because, hey, that brings money in? or are we
Yeah.
looking for other, you know, items that might be driven already through our general plan? And you did mention, you know, open space and, well, things that are more conservation minded, not simply, you know, fully development. Let's get as many doors here as possible, or bring in, you know, a lot of density to, you know, filling up all the hillsides.
Yeah, you know, this committee or the review committee, it can be whatever the town wants it to be. So it could be, you know, it could be economic development plus conservation. It could be public works. It could, you know, it really could be whoever the council wants it to be. So certainly open to making any tweaks on that front that you all.
Yeah. You know, I'm glad you brought up public works. It reminded me of the fact that, you know, what the mayor said at the beginning. One of the reasons we're not meeting in person is because our town hall is so tiny. We cannot meet safely at it right now because of the pandemic. And, you know, that's like a thing that, you know, we want. And then there are public works wants and needs and other things. So I do appreciate you bringing that up as ideas.
Well, I think
other inputs.
I think you could bring up some great points, Chris, but I also think this reflects some of those because of our general plan, right? So, you know, item 4 here on the screen talks about conservation type things. There was one, I think at the, there was one comment in here about the public works stuff somewhere. I don't remember what number it was. So this is, you know, I think by grabbing the general plan elements, I think it allows us to suggest that you could come for a PID for a number of things, and or it also enables us to go back to those who want a PID and say, you know, we're looking for more alignment with our general plan, and you know, the PID should include additional green space. You know, your design needs to include either additional green space, or if not there, then you need to be contributing to our being able to procure green space, park space, trail space, whatever, in another portion of the town.
Well, you know, some of the developers, they should be doing this to begin with, right? I think the PID is more for when a developer just can't financially, you know, do what they need to do to bring something from the general plan, right? Like they're not willing to, or unable to say, have a big enough park, or, you know, put in a community center, that in order to get something like that, you know, it would require the PID, not just because they don't want to pay for it, but because it's an opportunity to actually finance it at a lower cost. Like there's a good financial reason to do it. So, yeah, I don't want a PID to be kind of a blank check where, you know, we get in, we put this district in, and then suddenly, you know, we're not getting what we intended or what we need out of it.
Well, I think that's the purpose of why Aaron and the team is bringing policy forward, so that we can have a position when people come with a PID. So I mean, that's what we're looking at tonight. I mean, we may not, you know, we're only on page 3 of 11, 4 of 11 here, but you know, these guys have done some work to put basically a position statement together that we would hand anybody who has suggested they have an interest in a PID and say, here, read this and make sure you hit these guidelines. Now, if you don't like the guidelines, we can add some different language, but I think that's, you know, what we're trying to say here is let's make sure we have something, so we don't just get, you know, asked to do a PID so that somebody can finance their project at a lower cost.
Yeah, maybe I could add a little flavor on that as well, because we went around, we've done this with 3 or 4 meetings, I think, at this
Yeah.
point. But yeah, I just say, when we first started, we just said, if we want to use the principle of the general plan. And then we added some other things here, or we talked about some other things, and Aaron picked up on those and then put the words around them, so to speak. So kind of fine tuning some of the stuff around the general plan, but it all started with the principles that we meet, that in any PID financing mechanism, that it's got to meet those all the important principles of the general plan, which we have all those goals in each section, so to speak, spelled out. And then the rest of it was to, I would say, more or less complement that, and to even fine tune it so we can be a little bit more specific. So I think we covered a lot, so much in the general plan about open space and the goals of the town, and they are specifically spelled out in heading on each section in the general plan. So, and I think, Aaron, did you pull those in or as an addendum, or I'm not quite sure if you did or not, but that's where we're going on some of that they would be the presiding goals.
Yeah.
And then we would fine tune those.
Yes. So the majority of these are from the general plan, just taken out of those goals. And these are in here. Most of these kind of in the at the start here. It just Chris, to your point really quickly as well, I wanted to point out one thing that I forgot to mention. As far as, view sheds, green space, I had added this language that said beyond baseline town requirements, because I agree, there might be the right case where, hey, this is a great project, but the numbers just don't quite work to hit the minimum open space standards. But on the other end, you could potentially have a project that says, hey, we want to have, I don't know, let's just say 200 units. And the town is saying, we want more open space. We'd love to see more open space in that community. And maybe they could reduce their unit count as a result of the PID, because now they can, they can offset some of the costs of not developing land, the profits they might have made by financing the improvements through a PID. So I think that there's also some additional wins that could help to push the goals of the general plan or the base requirements of the town to a higher level to justify the PID, rather than just hitting minimum requirements.
Let's keep working through it.
Okay. Yeah. Any other comments on the criteria here? No, just like you said, keep moving on. And then as well as the public benefit finding up here, one item here is just that the district shouldn't be overlapping without express approval, by the town in the governing document, to just make sure that those tax rates are staying reasonable. And you could even add some language here, or an assessment area, right? So people aren't being taxed and assessed, in a way that would be too high of a burden. The next discussion point as well is wondering if the town wanted to set some kind of caps on the front end as far as the property tax goes. So you can see in the note off on the right-hand side there, the statutory limit is 15 mils, which is 1.5% of the taxable value, which is fairly high, given that the town's overlapping between the town, the county, special districts is 12.5 mils. So 15 would be very high. So some cities and towns have in their policy established a maximum that they would basically say something like, we're not going to approve a residential PID of more than 6 mils or 8 mils or 10 mils or whatever level that you see fit. But just so that people know on the front end to not ask for that unless there's sufficient justification, right? If there's a really special case that justifies it, or some great project that the town's really excited about, maybe it would justify a higher mill levy, but otherwise they need to be subject to this cap on the front end to just set expectations. And to that point, I would softly recommend a separate cap for residential projects than commercial projects because, the commercial buyers and users are generally more sophisticated parties and might be taxing themselves more than taxing future homeowners as part of the project. I did prepare, and I think it was in the packet, just a list of the existing tax rates that other districts that have been established in the state are. Is that something that'd be beneficial for folks to see at this point, or do you guys have an idea of what you'd like to see here?
I think it'd be good to put it up. We haven't had the package. We haven't had the package all that long, so.
Sure. Can everyone see this with the list of districts here? So I just point these out again. I've kind of made the note here. It is in your, up to your discretion what limit you might have or what a PID might get. And even if your policy says, hey, we're not going to approve over anything over 7 mils, you still might find that a project doesn't warrant more than 3 or 4, right? You can still set it under that limit. So I'll just quickly talk about a few of these. This first one, medical school campus, actually did get the statutory maximum, but that was because it was a commercial project for a medical school, and the city, for the developer and the project, in their mind, they would rather have the maximum tax to increase the amount of dollars they can borrow at a tax exempt rate, because they're going to be the payer of it. And the beneficiary, and the city was excited to get the medical school and wanted to incentivize that. So that was one of the contributing factors for 10 mils. Similarly, a mostly commercial project, Black Desert in Ivins for a resort was a 10 mil limit. But you can contrast that with, some commercial and residential mixed use that was 6 mils in Morgan County, 5 mils in Grantsville, 5 mils down in Hurricane, and 5 mils at the Jordan L Ridge that was just approved by Heber City the start of this month. So there is a variety. You generally see lower mill levy limits on residential projects, higher mill levy limits on resort and mixed use commercial projects. And then I'd also just point out your neighbors with the Mida Mountain Village and the Equestrian Center PIDs. They do have 20 mil, but that's a special, a difference that Mida has in its legislation. Yeah. Any questions while I have this table up before we kind of move back to the policy?
Do communities set 2 different mill rates? Do they say, for residential max of 5 and for commercial max of 10 or something like that?
So they're actually not able to do that because it's a uniform tax. So similar to the town's levy, you couldn't charge a higher tax rate on the hills than you would in the valleys because of snow removal or something. You have to be uniform. The town would have to establish like a special district for enhanced services or something. But what we have seen happen, and there's a few examples here, like Rome districts 1 and 2. One district was a commercial district and one district was a residential district, so that they could have differing tax rates. And then they issued bonds together. And then similarly, Red Bridge districts 1 and 2 issued jointly. And that was for large sewer and road infrastructure. And so the properties that were benefited just by the sewer were in one district, and then those who were benefited by the roads and the sewer were in a different district, so that the mill levies could, balance out based on the perceived benefit of the district and the bonds. So there's ways to work around that, where maybe like one component of a project could have its own district, and then the other components have a separate district. So there's some things you can do, but you do have to charge a uniform rate within each district.
I have a question about the medical school campus in Provo. I think there's only one medical school in the University of in Utah, and that's at the University of Utah. And then there's another school, a private school in southern Utah, but there's nothing in Provo that I'm aware of. This is Don Blumenthal speaking. I'm a faculty member in the University of Utah.
Yeah, so this is a new medical school. So it's called the Nordic College of Osteopathic Medicine. And they just I guess just isn't the right word, but last summer they just admitted their inaugural class. So right now they're, across the street at Rocky Mountain University's facility while they're building their campus in Provo, just by the East Bay Golf Course, on some of the old East Bay Golf Course property.
Let's bring it back to Hideout here.
Yeah, sorry.
And yeah. So thanks. So, I guess the way you read it, you stated it, looks like, I mean, we can choose to be conservative in our policy, can always modify our policy, but choose to be conservative, put it, I mean, most of the stuff we've seen and, residential, commercial, I mean, the stuff that's on this list, other than MITA doesn't count because they have special limits. Provo's a big deal, but everybody else is 1 mil, is 10 mils or less. So, I mean, I think that's probably the kind of numbers we need to be looking at. Did the Economic Development Committee, I saw you're talking 6 or 7. I think I saw in your notes on the prior page. Or 8 to 10. I mean.
Yeah. And, so I would say most are 8 or 10 if there's just a uniform cap. Washington City, for example, I think has something like 5 or 6 mils for residential and maybe 8 or 10 for commercial. So there's the ability to split it, but this could always be revised at a later date as well. So happy to, give any examples here, but would also just remind that I do have an example down here. You do get the 45% discount for primary residential, same as all taxes. So for example, a 7 mil 7 mils would generate or would cost $385 for $100,000 of primary residence and $700 for per $100,000 market value of secondary residence and commercial properties. So that's just kind of an example that can be extrapolated for $1 million home or $500,000 home or multi-million-dollar business.
That's pretty helpful. Yeah, I mean that's what I'm trying to think about is what are the implication on the taxpayers. If I were paying $385 extra a year for some value, to either to live in a subdivision that has the services and amenities that I want or whatever, then I could see that being something that you could stomach. I think you get much beyond that, and people will start to ask what it's for. So that's not a bad number.
Yeah. Any other thoughts from the other members of the council? Or 7 mils comfortable? Do you want something separate for commercial? And again, they can always provide justification that could allow you to go higher for the right project. So I don't want to belabor the point. I'll happily, move on if folks are comfortable with 7 or a different number.
I think we should leave this to the Economic Development Committee to suggest the rate after reviewing some of these numbers in detail. And I suggest we just discuss this policy and adopt it in the next meeting after the EDC has reviewed it. On the number rate, on the mill rate.
And that was probably, I agree, Jan. I think that was the biggest issue that we were beating around with Aaron. What is a good mill rate? And that table helped us. I mean, if you look at the most frequent number, it's 10 mil. But should we have it at 8? And so, I'm not sure we're changing anything dramatically between, call it 7 and 9 or something like that. So let's come up with a number that makes sense. But a lot of other points that were as equally as important, which were, you know, how we define the benefits, what are some of the things that we would like to see as a result of why we would give up or why we would cooperate in a PID scenario. And of course, having a policy is going to be better than not having one, because we're still subject, and correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, but you know, I mean, the state's already approved this, so we could get PIDs and not have any standards, so to speak, for the town. And that's what the idea of the policy is, to kind of establish with flexibility. You know, so that's the way I would describe it. By the way, there are some downsides to this, at least in my, so I thought I'd share this. I mean, it's like, not everything is, you know, roses on this one. So surrounding states like Nevada, Colorado, and California have some versions of this. You know, Aaron, you're welcome to pop in, but not necessarily under the same name. And they might have slight variations, but in general, it seems to be a popular financing mechanism. And you know, on the downside is, you know, the first buyer of the home or piece of property usually gets full transparency. You know, they're going to be paying extra, you know, call it whatever that might be per year, $500 a year on top of what they what their neighbor is paying. But usually that's fairly transparent. The reading that I've done, at least in what I've seen, is, you know, the second owner sometimes doesn't, you know, is not aware, or, you know, the transparency isn't always there from the seller to the buyer on the second round. And then they suddenly get in and go, why am I paying so much more taxes than my buddy down the street who's not in the PID? So I was hoping that we could certainly, if we enact these things, if we enact a PID, which we should, is to make sure that we incentivize transparency all along the cell chain until that PID is fully, you know, retired. And Aaron, I don't think you mentioned that, but is it a 40-year? What's the state law on the on how long a PID can go?
So the state law allows a PID to issue up to 40-year bonds, but our recommendation would be that your governing document limit it to 31 years. I think almost every city that has you know, approved districts has set the limit at 31, and that's just so same as you would do as a city or as a town. You know, it's a 30-year bond, but maybe one payment rolls over another 4 months, or, you know, something like that, right? So, but what we usually authorize in the governing document is 30-year bonds, but a 40-year repayment window. And that just means that if the district fell behind on payments, there's not a foreclosure, right? It's just if everyone's paying their taxes current, but let's say only 100 homes out of the 200 ever got built, you know, you can't raise the tax rate, so it delivers less money, but it gives the investors an extra 10-year runway to repay the bonds. And that honestly delivers probably a better, you know, interest rate for the district and things like that. So it makes it beneficial, but usually it's a 30-year bond with a 40-year max repayment window. And on, you know, year 41 in a day, the bonds disappear whether or not they're paid. So that's how these are typically structured. And so you can, but the town is in control of those kinds of limitations.
Is that in the PID policy here? I didn't see it.
It's usually left to the governing document, but the model governing document that we have, I believe that we've kind of shared in the past, does have a, you know, section that limits it to 31-year bonds and you know, 40 years of tax.
Ralph, to your other point, if the turnover of a property happens after at least one PID tax cycle, then the buyer would know that there's a charge on his or her tax bill, because it would be on a line item on the bill. And that would be, a buyer will see the property tax statement typically when you're buying a house. So.
Well, yeah, you're certainly, correct on, but sometimes they get lost in at least what I've read in doing my research on this. And, if you want to look at all the positives, but there are some negatives that sometimes that doesn't necessarily get, either shown properly. Let's face it, it's like we've 500 pages when you close on your house. You may miss something. So
yeah, we know it well because of all the questions we get on the Hideout district, which continue to come in. I got another one today.
I'm just suggesting that, that we, if we have a PID or we have some districts in town that, we also, so to speak, make sure that's, there's a public awareness on our website or something along those lines. So we're encouraging transparency. I'm not sure what that is yet, but something.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I have no issue with it.
And I apologize. My headphones are starting to give me a low battery warning, and I tried to switch it, and it is not conveying. So I lost my audio for a minute there. But I agree. I think disclosure is one of the most important pieces of the PID from the town's perspective. Mm-hmm. And just as you said, that after a year's cycle, it would appear in the list of property taxes. It would show up in the real estate forms. The other thing that's important that is a more recent development is the standard real estate disclosure form in the state of Utah was just amended to include a box that has to be checked to disclose if a property is within a public infrastructure district. Oh, so that's another piece that, it's not going to give everyone notice that's, not paying attention, but it's certainly another way. Another thing that we recommended as part of the policy is a recording. A notice of the district will get recorded per state law, but to include a separate notice that includes the information on the district, that there's a copy of the governing document on file with the town, letting them know the mill levy of the district, but also having this disclosure here with some bolded language disclosing that tax. And here it's blanked out, but that's because we don't know the mill levy of the ultimate districts yet. But for instance, for that 7 mills, it would have that $350 or $380 per 100,000 and $700 per 100,000. So there are some additional things that are being disclosed. A few, one or two cities has required it to be disclosed in the CC&Rs. I think that's something Heber City did with the Jordan L. Ridge, is that their CC&Rs also have to have a large disclosure. And then also we typically recommend that there's a separate colored page in the closing document. So maybe there's like a yellow sheet of paper or something that would say you are in a public infrastructure district. And that would only apply in the first sale, with the developer selling, but just another way so that buyers go in aware of what they're buying into. But again, all of those are in the control of the town. You could also require it in model homes that they have a sign or, something like that, just to make sure people are getting the disclosure at the appropriate times.
I like it. Some really good thoughts there.
So I think that we've covered, there's a few other items in here of what the content of the governing document would look like, but those are more just, provisions and things that I don't know warrant more time today, but I'm happy to answer any other questions or comments that folks might have. Sounds like there aren't any, but it sounds like maybe the best next step is for the, EDC to have another kind of round of comments and discussion, and then to get something final for a yes/no vote by the council.
Well, what would be useful, I think, for the EDC is to, get some feedback from the council, because it's the council who obviously decides on this. So if there are any thoughts. And, it's hard to digest this all in one fell swoop. It took me a bit. And then I wanted to do my own independent research, kind of, how does this affect what kinds of positive effects, what kind of negative effects could occur? And I think it would be unfair unless everybody had a good chance to get into this. But I think before the EDC does anything, it would be it'd be welcome for us to get some input from the council when they've gone through this a bit more, or would like to ask some additional questions.
This is Phil. I think it's a terrific starting document. It's great that the EDC has thought about this and is trying to tee up some guidelines for these things. So I'm very supportive of what I've seen tonight. And I don't have any, off the top of my head, I don't have any major recommendations for change to what I've seen, but I think it's a good start. I know you guys will do some more tweaking to it, but I think you hit the major highlights, which makes sense because a lot of other folks have done some work on all those other areas. So there's not the first time it's been thought about. So it's good. So, Carol, Sherry, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts.
I think you put a lot of work into this, and it sounds like we need something like this so that when somebody does apply, we have a guideline. So I think it's important.
My comment is that I think it's high time that we've had something like this. And I particularly like it because I see that it's a benefit to our town, just not the developer. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right, Carol. I mean, typically these people are coming in asking us to do something more than our basic zoning, and there needs to be something in it for the town in return, and this starts to set some standards for what our expectations are. So I think it's great.
Yeah.
So Aaron, thanks a lot. I think it's terrific. And I'm sure that if you guys can get it, again, I'd rather have it sooner than later. So I'm okay to put in 7 mills and go for it. But if the ECD wants another round, do another round, but please come back for the next meeting in April. I really want to get this thing signed off on. Am I the only one here?
Yeah, sorry, this is Aaron. I just wanted to confirm the direction that you would like to go. Were you seeking approval tonight when you just said you'd like to move?
I think I heard that that Ralph thought the ECD should spend a little bit more time on it. So I'm not going to overrule the ECD, but I am going to encourage you to get that done so that no later than the April meeting, we can get this thing blessed.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a lot of changes. I think just we need to come down to that mill rate, and certainly in multiple discussions with Aaron and Randy, we've got a good feel through that chart, what some of the averages are, so to speak. So I don't think there's going to be anything significant different than what we talked about tonight. I think we can certainly wrap this up by the next meeting. But it comes down to the council having some input. Do they have any hard feelings about whether For instance, the mill rate should be 9 versus 7 or something like that. I don't know. But you know, we've kind of hit where we think are the good averages, so to speak, you know, in our discussions.
Okay. Well,
Sounds good.
Thanks again, guys. We'll Alicia, let's make sure this gets on again for April, so we can get her done. Item 5. Once again, we need to take a look at our fee and rate schedule. There need to be some changes. The first one is the water meter fees. We need to fix that because we're upgrading the water meters to higher tech water meters that'll give us information on if they're leaking through, if we have leaks, if they're getting an unusual amount of water passing through the meter, we'll get notified on that without having to scan it. So that's an upgrade in the technology in the meters, and we want to take advantage of that. The second item on here is business licenses, and this isn't a change per se, but our code had language with the actual fee for the business license in it, and then when we agreed to raise the business license cost, we changed it on the fee schedule, but we didn't change it in the code. So we have to clean up the code to take care of that. And then we also have some language in here for a PID we just talked about, although we haven't put our hands on it yet. We are amending the schedule to reflect the PID fee. Even if we haven't got all the guidelines finalized, if someone comes in for a PID, we still have there's going to be fees, as mentioned by Aaron just a minute ago. There's a PID application and a PID. There's a second one for the second document, whatever that was, somewhere. And then here's the business license change, which is $75. The code, this again, we changed this to 75 already, but the code still said 50, so we're cleaning that up. And somewhere in here is the water meters.
I think it was below.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, keep going, Mayor.
There we go.
Yep, there it is.
So,
Mayor, would you like me to talk about that really quick?
no, I just talked about it.
Sounds good. I just wanted to ask.
No, I just talked about it. We're going to higher tech meters, which are smart meters, and they're going to do a better job for us, and it's the right thing to do. So they cost more money, but they're gonna catch leaks sooner, for example. So they'll save the town even more money when somebody calls up and complains that their water bill just went up to $7,000. And we, instead of giving them a break, we won't have to because we'll see it much sooner. So those are the changes in the meter, in the fees. If the council has got other questions, then please go ahead. Otherwise, we'll need to I'll need you to give me a motion to in support of a resolution repealing and replacing the fee schedule, including changes to the water meter fees, business licenses, and public infrastructure district. Anybody want to give me a motion for,
Also move.
thanks, Ralph.
I'll second it.
Thanks, Sherry. So, we still have a quorum, so I can still do this, although we don't have everyone, but I think that's okay for this particular item. So, Carol, how do you feel about this?
Yes, I
Thank
approve.
you. Sherry
Yes.
and Ralph?
Yes.
My understanding that Chris had to drop off because she's got, she had to drop off because she's got something she needs to deal with early tomorrow, and Bob has faded with his jet lag. So, but we had 3 members, we still have a quorum, and the motion passes. So thank you. Okay, so that takes us to the end of tonight's agenda. I want to thank everyone for a terrific discussion. Great job, not only by the council and the folks who prepared the staff preparing the documents, but also thanks for those of you in the community who raised your hands, sent text messages, etc., emails on these documents. Very helpful. We appreciate it very much that you people are getting involved and looking at this content and making sure that helping us make sure that we're thinking about these things holistically. So I thank you for that. We do not need to have an exec session tonight. Polly has communicated. At least I don't think so. Polly, any change to that? No? Okay.
Yeah, no, I checked and there's no updates at this point.
So I really just need a motion to adjourn.
Also move.
Thank you. In a second.
Second.
Thank you, Ralph. And then again, as a reminder, before I take the vote, don't forget to send your availability dates to Alicia for a possible extra meeting between now and the next one. All right. Sherry, you ready to go home or get off of the Zoom?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I am
Ralph?
home.
Yeah. Carol?
Yes.
Okay. Ralph?
Yeah.
Okay. The meeting is over. Thanks again to everyone, and wish you all a good night. And we'll see you at the next meeting.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay, good night.
Night.
Kill me, just, ugh, Alicia.
Hold on just a sec. We're still on YouTube.